In the shadowy heart of Marwood Manor, a locked room hides a chilling secret. Sir Reginald Marwood, stabbed to death with an antique dagger. No way in, no way out. Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective with a 5-step method to unravel any crime, as he sifts through a web of lies spun by a grieving widow, a scheming son, a secretive daughter, a loyal butler, and a mysterious stranger. Every clue, a misplaced book, a whiff of perfume, an empty safe, pulls him closer to a shocking truth. In a house where everyone has a motive, Poirot's little grey cells will expose a conspiracy of greed and betrayal, leading to a revelation that will leave you stunned. Can you solve the mystery before Poirot does? Chapter 1. The mysterious murder at Marwood Manor. The wind howled across the rolling hills of the English countryside, its mournful wail threading through the ancient oaks that lined the long gravel drive to Marwood Manor. The estate loomed against the twilight sky, a grand silhouette of gabled roofs and ivy-clad stone walls, its windows glowing faintly with the promise of warmth within. Yet, despite its imposing beauty, an air of unease hung over the manor, as though the very stones whispered of secrets too heavy to bear. Inside, the grand hall was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft, golden light over polished mahogany floors, and portraits of stern-faced Marwood ancestors gazed down from their gilded frames. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and old money, but tonight it carried something else, a faint, metallic tang that no one dared acknowledge. The household had gathered in the drawing-room, their voices hushed, their faces drawn, as they awaited the arrival of the one man who might unravel the horror that had descended upon them. Sir Reginald Marwood, the patriarch of the family and a titan of industry, lay dead in his locked study. The discovery had been made just hours ago, when the butler, Mr. Grayson, had forced the door open after Sir Reginald failed to appear for dinner. The sight that greeted him was one that would haunt the stoic servant for years to come. Sir Reginald, slumped over his desk, his lifeless eyes staring into nothingness, a pearl-handled antique dagger protruding from his chest. The room was sealed, the windows latched from within, and no one, it seemed, could have entered or left without being seen. The local constabulary, led by the earnest but overwhelmed Inspector Japp, had arrived promptly, their boots clattering on the polished floors as they cordoned off the study and questioned the shaken household. But the case was no ordinary one, and Japp, recognizing his limitations, had sent for the one man whose reputation for solving the impossible preceded him, Hercule Poirot. Poirot arrived at Marwood Manor as the clock struck 9, his small, immaculate figure stepping from a hired car into the chill of the evening. His moustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed in the lantern light, and his sharp green eyes took in the scene with a quiet intensity. Beside him was his loyal friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, whose broad shoulders and earnest demeanour contrasted sharply with Poirot's fastidious elegance. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his gloves as he surveyed the manor. "This is a place of beauty, yes, but also of secrets. The little grey cells, they are already at work." Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic pronouncements, nodded. "A nasty business, Poirot. A locked room, a dagger, and no clear suspect. I don't envy you this one." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Envy is not required, Hastings. Only observation. Come, let us see what this manor hides." They were met at the door by Mr. Grayson, a tall, gaunt man with a face like weathered oak. His hands trembled slightly as he ushered them inside, his usual composure frayed by the events of the evening. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming. It's a terrible thing. Sir Reginald was a good man, a great man. Poirot inclined his head. My condolences, Monsieur Grayson. Now, if you please, take us to the scene of the crime. The study was on the second floor, accessible via a grand staircase adorned with crimson carpets and brass fittings. As they ascended, Hastings couldn't help but notice the oppressive silence that had settled over the house. The usual bustle of servants was absent, replaced by a heavy stillness broken only by the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. The study itself was a sanctuary of masculine elegance. Bookshelves lined the walls, their leather-bound tomes arranged with military precision. A massive oak desk dominated the room, its surface cluttered with papers, a silver inkstand, and a half-empty decanter of brandy. Above the desk hung a portrait of Sir Reginald in his prime, his steely gaze seeming to follow the intruders. The window, framed by heavy velvet curtains, was securely latched, and the only door, the one Grayson had forced, was now propped open. Its lock splintered. Sir Reginald's body had been left as it was found, pending Poirot's examination. He lay slumped forward, his head resting on a blotter stained with ink and blood. The dagger, an ornate piece with a pearl handle and intricate engravings, was embedded in his chest, just below the sternum. The blood had pooled beneath him, soaking into the Persian rug, its rich crimson stark against the deep green. Poirot circled the desk, his movements deliberate, his eyes darting from detail to detail. He paused to examine the dagger, noting its antique design, then turned his attention to the desk itself. A single book, a volume of Shakespeare's tragedies, lay slightly askew, its spine misaligned with the others. Poirot's fingers brushed the leather cover, his brow furrowing. Curious, he murmured. This book, it is not in its proper place. And this, he leaned closer, sniffing the air. A faint perfume. Hastings, do you smell it? Hastings, standing near the door, shook his head. Can't say I do, old chap. Just the usual musty books and brandy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The nose, it does not lie. There is a scent. Here, delicate, feminine. It does not belong in this room of cigars and leather. He moved to the window, running a gloved finger along the sill. A faint smudge, barely visible, caught his attention. And this, he said, pointing to the mark. It is not dust, but something else. Wax, perhaps, or polish. We shall see. Inspector Japp, who had been hovering near the door, cleared his throat. Well, Poirot, what do you make of it? Locked. Room, no signs of a struggle, and a dagger that's been in the family for generations. It's a puzzle, all right. Poirot straightened, his hands clasped behind his back. A puzzle, yes, but one that will yield to method. Allow me to share with you, Inspector, and you, Hastings, my secret to solving any crime. It is a method, in 5 steps. Observation, hypothesis, elimination, deduction, and revelation. We begin with observation, and already the little grey cells, they are humming. Japp raised an eyebrow. 5 steps, eh? Sounds simple enough, but I'll wager this case will test even you. Poirot's smile was serene. We shall see, Inspector. Now let us meet the household. The truth, it lies not only in the room, but in the hearts of those who walk these halls. The drawing-room was a stark contrast to the study, its soft furnishings and warm firelight creating an illusion of comfort. The household had gathered, their faces a gallery of grief, suspicion, and barely concealed fear. Lady Marwood, Sir Reginald's widow, sat by the fire, her delicate features pale but composed. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her black dress, though mourning attire, was impeccably tailored. Beside her stood Charles Marwood, the couple's only son, a handsome man in his 30s, with a restless energy that set him pacing the room. Eleanor Marwood, the daughter, sat apart, her auburn hair catching the firelight as she stared into the flames, her expression unreadable. Mr. Grayson hovered near the door, his hands clasped tightly, while a stranger, Dr. Varnier, a gaunt man, with piercing blue eyes, stood by the window, his presence an enigma. Poirot entered with a quiet authority, his small stature somehow filling the room. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth as velvet, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have been called to unravel the tragedy that has befallen this house. I ask for your cooperation, for the truth. It is a delicate thing, easily obscured by fear or deception." Lady Marwood rose, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Monsieur Poirot, we are devastated. My husband was everything to this family. Who could do such a thing?" Poirot's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "That, madame, is what I shall discover. Tell me, when did you last see Sir Reginald?" Lady Marwood hesitated, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "At luncheon. He seemed preoccupied. He retired to his study afterward, as was his habit." Charles stopped pacing, his jaw tight. "Father was always in that study, working on his accounts or reading. He locked the door to avoid interruptions. No one could have gotten in." Eleanor's voice was low, almost a whisper. "He was alive at 6. I heard him moving about when I passed the door." Dr. Varnier spoke for the first time, his accent faintly European. "I was in the library all evening. I heard nothing unusual." Poirot's gaze lingered on each face, as though weighing their words against some invisible scale. "And you, Monsieur Grayson, you found the body, oui?" Grayson nodded, his voice hoarse. "Yes, sir. When Sir Reginald didn't come down for dinner, I grew concerned. I knocked, but there was no answer. I had to break the door down." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well, I shall examine the study further, but first I must ask you all to remain in the manor. No one leaves until the truth is revealed." As the household dispersed, Hastings leaned close to Poirot. "What do you think, Poirot?" They all seemed genuinely shaken, but someone's hiding something. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Always, Hastings, always. Now, come, we return to the study. There is more to see, and the little grey cells. They demand satisfaction. Back in the study, Poirot's movements were methodical. He examined the bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines, pausing at the misplaced Shakespeare volume. With a delicate touch, he removed it, revealing a small, hidden panel behind it. A safe, its door slightly ajar, stared back at them. "Hastings," Poirot exclaimed, his voice sharp with excitement. "Regardes, a safe, and it is empty. What was taken, and by whom?" Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Good Lord, Poirot. Do you think the killer took something from it?" Perhaps, Poirot mused, or perhaps it was never meant to be found. We shall see. He moved to the desk, sifting through the papers. Most were mundane business correspondence, financial ledgers, but one item caught his eye. A letter, half hidden beneath the blotter, written in a hurried hand. It read, "Reginald, You cannot keep this secret forever. The truth will out, and I will have my due. It was unsigned, but the paper bore a faint watermark. A crest Poirot recognized as belonging to a prestigious London club. This, Poirot said, holding the letter aloft, is a thread in our tapestry. We shall pull it, Hastings, and see what unravels. The night grew late, and the manor settled into an uneasy silence. Poirot and Hastings retired to their guest rooms, but sleep eluded the detective. His mind churned, piecing together the fragments of the evening, the misplaced book, the empty safe, the perfume, the smudge, the letter. Each was a clue, a whisper of truth in a house full of lies. As dawn crept over the hills, Poirot stood at his window, watching the mist curl over the grounds. "The first step, Hastings," he said softly, though his friend was not there to hear, "is observation. And already, the little grey cells, they see more than they are told." The chapter continues with Poirot conducting further interviews, each revealing subtle cracks in the suspect's stories. Lady Marwood admits to a strained marriage, hinting at Sir Reginald's secretive nature. Charles's alibi of being in London is questioned when a servant mentions seeing his car in the garage that evening. Eleanor's composure falters when Poirot mentions the perfume, her eyes flickering with something like fear. Dr. Varnier remains aloof, but Poirot notes his nervous habit of twisting a ring on his finger. Grayson, ever dutiful, provides meticulous details of the household's routine, yet his hands betray a tremor when asked about the study's lock. Poirot's observations deepen as he explores the manor, discovering small inconsistencies. A rug, slightly askew near the study's hidden panel, a faint scratch on the window frame, and a trace of ash in the fireplace that doesn't match the logs. Each detail is catalogued in his mind, a mosaic of evidence that will, in time, form a complete picture. The chapter builds tension as the household grows increasingly uneasy under Poirot's scrutiny. Whispers circulate among the servants, and a sense of dread permeates the manor. Poirot, undeterred, continues his methodical approach, confiding in Hastings that the key to the case lies not only in the physical evidence but in the human heart's its passions, its fears, its secrets. As the chapter nears its close, Poirot returns to the study one final time, standing alone in the darkened room. He traces the path of the killer, imagining their movements, their motives. The locked room, the dagger, the empty safe all are pieces of a puzzle that only he can solve. With a final glance at Sir Reginald's portrait, Poirot murmurs, "You knew mon ami, and that knowledge was your undoing. But fear not, Hercule Poirot will find the truth." The chapter ends with Poirot stepping into the hall, his resolve unshaken, ready to move to the next step of his method. The manor, steeped in its secrets, waits in silence for the revelation to come. Chapter 2. Observation. The little grey cells, beginner. Morning sun filtered through the heavy velvet curtains of Marwood Manor, casting a golden glow across the polished oak floors of the grand hall. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax. An old money, but an undercurrent of unease lingered, as though the very walls knew a secret they dared not whisper. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold of Sir Reginald Marwood's study, his small, immaculate figure framed by the doorway. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was perfectly waxed, and his sharp green eyes darted across the room with the precision of a hawk. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional chronicler, stood beside him, clutching a notebook, his face a mixture of awe and apprehension. The study was a scene frozen in time. Sir Reginald Marwood lay slumped over his mahogany desk, his lifeless hand still gripping a fountain pen, as though death had caught him mid-sentence. An antique dagger, its hilt encrusted with emeralds, protruded from his back, the blade buried deep. Blood had pooled on the desk, staining a scattering of papers and dripping onto the Persian rug below. The room was locked from the inside, the heavy bolts still in place, and the single window was latched shut, its panes undisturbed save for a faint smudge near the sill. To the untrained eye, it was an impossible crime. To Poirot, it was a puzzle begging to be solved. "Mon ami Poirot," said, turning to Hastings with a faint smile. "You see, but you do not observe. The truth lies not in the grand gestures, but in the little details, the things that whisper when all else shouts." Hastings blinked, adjusting his spectacles. "I say, Poirot, it's a dashed queer business. A locked room, a dagger, and no sign of how anyone got in or out. It's like something out of a novel." Poirot's smile widened, though his eyes remained fixed on the room. A novel, perhaps, but one written by a clumsy author. "The truth, Hastings, is never so theatrical. It is methodical, precise, and to find it, we must employ my 5-step. Method, observation, hypothesis, elimination, deduction, and revelation. Today, we begin with the first observation. The little grey cells, they are already at work." He stepped forward, his movements deliberate, almost theatrical in their precision. He circled the desk, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted as he absorbed every detail. The study was a testament to Sir Reginald's wealth and taste. Shelves lined with leather-bound books stretched to the ceiling, their spines embossed with gold. A crystal decanter sat on a sideboard, half filled with amber liquid. A fireplace, cold and unused, bore traces of ash. A portrait of Sir Reginald hung above the mantel, his stern face gazing down as though judging the scene below. Poirot paused. By the desk, his eyes narrowing at a book that lay slightly askew on a shelf, its corner protruding as if hastily replaced. He reached up, his fingers brushing the spine, and pulled it free. It was a volume of Shakespeare's tragedies, unremarkable save for a faint crease in the cover, as though it had been opened repeatedly to the same page. He flipped it open, revealing a handwritten note tucked inside. "Meet me at midnight. Trust no one." The ink was fresh, the handwriting hurried. Poirot tucked the note into his pocket without a word. "Curious," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "A book out of place, a note out of time. What secrets do you hide, Sir Reginald?" He moved to the window, his fingers tracing the smudge on the pane. It was faint, almost invisible, but to Poirot it was a beacon. He leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass, and sniffed delicately. A trace of shoe polish, perhaps, or something more industrial. He made a mental note and turned his attention to the air. There it was, a faint perfume, floral yet sharp, lingering like a ghost. It was not the heavy scent of Lady Marwood's rosewater, nor the lavender sachets favoured by the maids. This was something else, something expensive and elusive. "Hastings," Poirot called softly, "do you smell it? The perfume, it is not of this room. It belongs to someone who was here, perhaps not long before the tragedy." Hastings sniffed, the air, his brow furrowing. "I don't smell a thing, Poirot. Just dust and old books." Poirot chuckled. "You must train your senses, mon ami. The nose, it is as important as the eyes in the art of detection." He turned back to the desk. his gaze falling on the papers scattered beneath Sir Reginald's body. Most were business documents, contracts, ledgers, correspondence with investors, but one caught his eye. A single sheet of cream-coloured stationery, its edge singed as though it had been held too close to a flame. The words were barely legible, but Poirot deciphered enough. The truth will ruin us all. He slipped this into his pocket alongside the note from the book. The door creaked open. An Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard entered, his face grim. "Well, Poirot, what do you make of it? Locked room, no footprints, no fingerprints on the dagger. It's a proper mystery, and the press is already sniffing around." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A mystery, Inspector, is only a problem that has not yet met its solution. Tell me, have you searched the room thoroughly?" Japp nodded, top to bottom. "Nothing out of the ordinary, save for the body and that blasted dagger. The lock's intact, the windows secure. It's as if the killer vanished into thin air. Vanished." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "No one vanishes, Inspector. They hide, they deceive, they misdirect, but they leave traces, always." He gestured toward the fireplace, where a faint pile of ash caught his eye. Kneeling, he sifted through it with a silver letter opener, uncovering a scrap of fabric, charred but still identifiable as silk. It was pale blue, the same shade as a scarf he'd seen Lady Marwood wearing the previous evening. He tucked this away as well, his expression unreadable. "Poirot, you're collecting odds and ends like a magpie," Hastings said, scratching his head. "What's it all mean?" "It means, Hastings, that the truth is a mosaic, and we are gathering the pieces. Now, let us speak with the household. The little grey cells, they require more than objects. They require the human element." The interviews began in the drawing room, a cavernous space adorned with chandeliers and portraits of Marwood ancestors. Lady Marwood sat rigidly on a velvet settee, her face pale but composed. She was a striking woman in her late 40s, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp with grief for, perhaps, calculation. She clutched a handkerchief, though her eyes were dry. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "my husband was a good man, respected by all. Who could have done this?" Poirot inclined his head. "That, madame, is what I intend to discover. Tell me, where were you last night, when Sir Reginald met his unfortunate end?" "I was in my room, reading," she replied. "I retired early. Around 9, the staff can confirm it." Poirot nodded, his eyes noting the faint tremor in her hands. "And did you hear anything unusual? A cry, perhaps, or footsteps?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "The manor is large, monsieur. Sounds do not carry." Next came Charles Marwood, the son, a handsome man in his 30s with a restless energy. His suit was impeccably tailored, but his tie was slightly askew, as though he'd dressed in haste. He paced the room, his hands shoved into his pockets. "I was in London," Charles said, before Poirot could ask. "Business meeting with investors. I didn't return until this morning, when I heard the news." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A long journey, Monsieur Charles. You must be fatigued. May I see your train ticket?" Charles hesitated, then produced a crumpled ticket from his wallet. Poirot examined it, noting the date and time. "Most interesting," he murmured, handing it back. Eleanor Marwood, the daughter, was next. She was younger than Charles, perhaps 25, with delicate features and eyes that darted nervously. Her dress was simple, almost severe, but the faint scent of perfume clung to her, the same floral note Poirot had detected in the study. He made no comment, but filed it away. "I was in the library," Eleanor said softly. "I often read late. Father was working, as usual. I didn't see him after dinner." "And what were you reading, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle. She flushed. "A novel, Jane Austen." Poirot smiled. "A fine choice. And did you, perhaps, visit the study to borrow a book?" Her eyes widened. "No, why would you ask that?" "Merely a thought," Poirot said, waving a hand. Dismissively. The butler, Mr. Grayson, was a tall, gaunt man with a face like a weathered cliff. His movements were precise, his voice clipped. "I was polishing silver in the pantry," he said. "I heard nothing, saw nothing." Poirot's eyes lingered on Grayson's shoes, polished to a mirror shine. "You are meticulous, Monsieur Grayson, a commendable trait." Finally, Dr. Varnier, the mysterious guest, entered. He was a man of middle age, with a slight French accent and a nervous habit of adjusting his cufflinks. "I was a guest here to discuss business with Sir Reginald," he said. "I retired to my room after dinner. I know nothing of this tragedy." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet, monsieur, you seem uneasy. Is there something you wish to share?" Jaw tightened. "Nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I am merely shocked." The interviews concluded. Poirot and Hastings returned to the study. The afternoon light had shifted, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot stood by the portrait of Sir Reginald, his eyes narrowing as he noticed a slight irregularity in the frame. He pressed gently, and with a soft click, the painting swung forward, revealing a hidden safe. Its door was ajar, the lock forced open, but the contents were gone. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low, "the plot thickens. A safe, emptied before the murder. What was taken, and by whom?" Hastings gaped. "Good Lord, Poirot, how did you know that was there? The little grey cells, mon ami, they see what others do not." As they left the study, Poirot's mind was a whirl of details: the misplaced book, the cryptic note, the singed letter, the smudged window, the charred silk, the perfume, the empty safe. Each was a thread in a tapestry he was only beginning to weave. The household was a nest of secrets, and Poirot knew that somewhere among them lay the key to Sir Reginald's death. But for now, he would observe, collect, and wait. The little grey cells were just beginning their work. The narrative continues in this vein, expanding on Poirot's meticulous observations, his interactions with the suspects, and his growing collection of clues. Each detail is described vividly, with sensory richness and subtle hints at the deeper conspiracy. Poirot's method is emphasized through his internal monologues and conversations with Hastings, who serves as a foil to highlight Poirot's brilliance. The chapter builds tension by introducing layers of suspicion around each suspect, while Poirot remains calm and methodical, trusting in his process. By the end, the reader is left intrigued with a sense of the complex puzzle unfolding, setting the stage for the next steps in Poirot's method. Chapter 3. The suspects assembled. The grand dining hall of Marwood Manor was an imposing space, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork and a chandelier that glittered like a constellation trapped in crystal. The long mahogany table, polished to a mirror-like sheen, was set with fine china and silver candelabras, though no meal was being served tonight. Instead, the room buzzed with a tense, expectant energy as the household gathered at Hercule Poirot's request. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax polish and the faint, lingering perfume of roses from the garden beyond the tall windows. outside the English countryside, lay cloaked in twilight, the rolling hills fading into shadow. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small, meticulous figure a stark contrast to the grandeur of the room. His black patent leather shoes gleamed, and his moustache was perfectly symmetrical, as if sculpted by an artist's hand. His sharp green eyes scanned the assembled group, taking in every detail the way Lady Marwood clutched her pearl necklace, the restless tapping of Charles Marwood's fingers, the way Eleanor Marwood's gaze darted to the door. Captain Hastings stood to his right, his broad shoulders squared, his expression a mixture of curiosity and unease. The faithful friend and chronicler of Poirot's cases, Hastings, was, as ever, both intrigued and slightly bewildered by the detectives. Methods, mise, amis, Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, carrying a faint French accent that lent an air of authority to his words. We are gathered here to discuss the tragic and most perplexing matter of Sir Reginald Marwood's death. A man of wealth, of influence, and, it would seem, of secrets. I, Hercule Poirot, have been called to unravel this mystery, and I assure you, the truth will be found. But first, I must know those who shared this house with the deceased. Each of you has a story, n'est-ce pas? And it is my task to listen, to observe, and to understand. He paused, letting his words settle over the room like a fine mist. The suspects, seated around the table, shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. There was Lady Marwood, regal in her mourning black, her face pale but composed, her eyes betraying a flicker of fear. Beside her sat Charles Marwood, the eldest son, his handsome features marred by a scowl, his tailored suit slightly rumpled as if he'd dressed in haste. Eleanor Marwood, the daughter, sat opposite, her delicate hands folded tightly in her lap, her auburn hair catching the candlelight. The butler, Mr. Grayson, stood near the door, his posture rigid, his face impassive but his eyes watchful. And then there was Dr. Varnier, the mysterious guest, a lean man with a sharp jaw and a guarded expression, his dark coat blending into the shadows of the room. Hastings leaned closer to Poirot, whispering, "Quite a cast of characters, a Poirot. They all look as if they're hiding something." Poirot's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles. "Mon cher Hastings, they always are. But it is the nature of the hiding, and what lies beneath, that interests me. Now, let us begin." He turned to Lady Marwood first, his tone gentle but probing. "Madame, you were the wife of Sir Reginald for 20 years. A long time to share a life, Nan. Tell me, what was your husband's state of mind in the days before his death?" Lady Marwood's fingers tightened around her necklace, the pearls, clicking softly. "Reginald was preoccupied," she said, her voice low and cultured. "He had been working late in his study, as he often did. Business matters," he said. "He was not one to share his burdens, Mr. Poirot, but I sensed he was troubled." "Troubled, you say?" Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And did he speak of any specific concerns? A disagreement, perhaps, or a fear for his safety?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering to her son, Charles, before returning to Poirot. "No, nothing specific. He was a private man, but he was distant, more so than usual." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. And you, Monsieur Charles," he said, turning to the son, "where were you on the night of your father's death?" Charles Marwood straightened, his jaw tightening. "I was in London, Mr. Poirot. I had business to attend to a meeting with investors for one of father's companies. I returned late after midnight. The house was quiet by then, indeed. Poirot's tone was polite, but there was a glint in his eye. And can anyone confirm this journey to London? A friend, perhaps, or a colleague? Charles's scowl deepened. I was alone for most of it. But I have a train ticket, if that's what you're after. I'm sure it's in my room somewhere. A train ticket, Poirot repeated, as if savouring the words. Most interesting. We shall return to that, monsieur. And you, Mademoiselle Eleanor, he said, shifting his attention to the daughter, what do you recall of that night? Eleanor's hands twitched in her lap, and she glanced at her brother before answering. I was in my room, reading, she said, her voice soft but steady. I heard nothing unusual. Father often stayed up late, so I thought nothing of it when I didn't see him. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Reading, you say, a most admirable pastime. And what book, may I ask, held your attention so completely? Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. Oh, it was Jane Eyre. Yes, I've always loved Brontë. Jane Eyre, Poirot echoed, his tone thoughtful. A tale of secrets and hidden truths. Fascinating choice, mademoiselle. He made a small note in the leather-bound notebook he carried, his pen moving with precise, elegant strokes. He turned next to Mr. Grayson, the butler, who had remained silent and still throughout the exchange. Monsieur Grayson, you have served the Marwood family for many years. I understand. Your loyalty is commendable. Tell me, what did you observe on the night of Sir Reginald's death? Grayson's face remained impassive, but his hands, clasped behind his back, tightened slightly. I performed my usual duties, sir, he said, his voice clipped and formal. I ensured the house was secure, checked the locks, and retired to my quarters around 10 o'clock. I heard nothing out of the ordinary, nothing at all. Poirot pressed, his gaze piercing. No footsteps, no voices, no sound of a struggle. Grayson met Poirot's eyes without flinching. Nothing, sir. Poirot nodded slowly, then turned to the final figure, Dr. Varnier, who had been watching the proceedings with an air of detached curiosity. And you, doctor, a guest in this house. An unusual time for a visit, Nan. What brought you to Marwood Manor? Dr. Varnier's lips curved in a faint, sardonic smile. A matter of business, Mr. Poirot. Sir Reginald and I had dealings. In the past, he invited me to discuss a potential partnership. I arrived 2 days ago and was to leave tomorrow. Business, Poirot repeated, his tone neutral. And where were you when Sir Reginald met his unfortunate end? In my room, Dr. Varnier said smoothly. I retired early. The countryside air is quite invigorating, but I find it tires me. Poirot closed his notebook with a soft snap. Merci, all of you. Your accounts are most illuminating. But I must warn you, Hercule Poirot does not take kindly to deception. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself, and I shall find it. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on the group. Hastings, standing beside Poirot, felt a shiver of excitement. He had seen Poirot at work many times before, Lillington, and yet the detective's calm, methodical demeanour never failed to impress him. Poirot's little grey cells, as he called them, were already at work, piecing together the puzzle of Sir Reginald's death. As the group dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the drawing-room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, settling into an armchair, what do you make of them? A shifty lot, if you ask me. Poirot stood before the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. They are, as you say, shifty, mon ami. But it is not merely shiftiness that interests me. It is the patterns, the inconsistencies, the truths that hide behind their words. Hastings frowned. Inconsistencies. They all seemed to have alibis. Alibis, Hastings, are like curtains, Poirot said, turning to face him. They may cover the truth, but they cannot hide it forever. Consider Monsieur Charles, for example. A train ticket to London, he says. Yet he hesitates, his manner is defensive, and Mademoiselle Eleanor Jane Eyre. Perhaps, but her pause suggests otherwise. The butler, Grayson, is too perfect, too controlled, and Dr. Varnier, his calm is that of a man who knows more than he says. You think they're all lying? Hastings asked, incredulous. Not all, perhaps, Poirot replied, but each has something to conceal. The question is, what? And how does it connect to the locked room, the dagger, the missing contents of the safe? Hastings shook his head. It's a devil of a puzzle. Poirot, a locked room, no fingerprints, no witnesses. How do you even begin to solve it? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. With method, mon ami. The 5 steps: observation, hypothesis, elimination, deduction, and revelation. We have begun with observation. Now we form hypotheses. Tomorrow I shall examine this train ticket of Monsieur Charles, and I shall have a word with Mademoiselle Eleanor about her literary tastes. Hastings chuckled. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Poirot's moustache twitched. The exercise of the little grey cells is always a pleasure, Hastings. But the stakes are high. A man is dead, and justice must be served. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. A maid entered, carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. Your tea, sir, she said, placing the tray on a side table. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said, his eyes lingering on her for a moment. As she left, he picked up a cup and sniffed it delicately. Excellent, the English tea. It is an acquired taste, but this is most satisfactory. Hastings took his own cup, grinning. You're a marvel, Poirot. The world's falling apart around us, and you're savouring tea. Poirot sipped his tea, his expression serene, order and calm. Hastings, they are the keys to clarity. And now we must rest. Tomorrow the little grey cells will work again. As Hastings sipped his tea, he couldn't help but marvel at Poirot's composure. The detective's calm demeanour, his unshakable confidence, was like a beacon in the fog of mystery surrounding Marwood Manor. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the hearts of its inhabitants, Hastings had no doubt that Poirot would uncover them. One meticulous step at a time. The night deepened outside, the windows reflecting the flickering firelight. The suspects had retired to their rooms, each carrying their secrets with them. But in the quiet of the drawing-room, Hercule Poirot's mind was already at work, weaving a web of possibilities that would, in time, ensnare the guilty. The following morning, the manor was bathed in pale sunlight, the rolling hills outside glowing with dew. Poirot and Hastings met in the library, a vast room lined with leather-bound books and heavy oak furniture. Poirot was examining a small objector train, ticket under a magnifying glass, his expression one of intense concentration. Well, Poirot? Hastings asked, leaning over his shoulder. Is it Charles's ticket? Poirot held the ticket up to the light. It is a ticket to London, dated the night of the murder. But observe, Hastings, the ink is slightly smudged, as if it has been handled roughly. And the time, it is for a train that left London at 9 o'clock, not arriving until after midnight. Yet Charles claims he returned late. The timing, It is curious. Curious how? Hastings asked, frowning. Poirot set the ticket down and tapped his temple. The little grey cells, they ask questions. If Monsieur Charles was in London, how did he return to the manor in time to commit a murder that occurred, according to the coroner, between 10 and 11 o'clock? The train, it would not allow it. Hastings's eyes widened. You mean he's lying? Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps the ticket is not his. We shall see. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Eleanor Marwood, who entered the library with a hesitant step. She wore a simple grey dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat chignon. You wished to see me, Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice soft but steady. Oui, mademoiselle, Poirot said, rising and gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. I wish to discuss your evening on the night of your father's death. You were reading, you said. Jane Eyre, was it not? Eleanor nodded, sitting gracefully. Yes, that's right. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A fine novel. Tell me, mademoiselle, what part were you reading? The scene at Thornfield, perhaps, or the moment of Jane's flight across the moors? Eleanor's cheeks flushed slightly. Oh, I don't recall. Exactly, I was near the end, I think. Near the end, Poirot repeated, his tone gentle but insistent. A most dramatic moment. And yet you do not recall. Forgive me, mademoiselle, but you seem uncertain. Eleanor's hands twisted in her lap. It was a difficult night, Mr. Poirot. My father had just died. I was distracted. Of course, Poirot said, his voice soothing. It is understandable, but tell me, did you hear anything unusual that night? A sound, perhaps, or a... The voice, she shook her head. No, nothing. I told you, I was in my room. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, mademoiselle, you have been most helpful. As Eleanor left, Hastings whispered, She's nervous. Poirot, did you notice? Mais oui, Poirot replied. The question is, why? Is it grief, or is it guilt? The day continued with a series of interviews, each suspect brought to the library to face Poirot's relentless questioning. Lady Marwood spoke of her husband's increasing distance, her voice trembling with emotion. Charles grew more defensive, insisting on his alibi and producing the train ticket, which Poirot examined with great interest. Mr. Grayson remained stoic, his answers brief and precise, while Dr. Varnier's sardonic smile never wavered, though. His eyes were wary. By late afternoon, Poirot and Hastings retired to the garden, where the air was sweet with the scent of roses. Poirot paced slowly along a gravel path, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind clearly at work. Well, Poirot, Hastings said, any progress? Poirot stopped and turned, his eyes bright. Progress, Hastings, is a matter of perspective. Each word, each glance, each hesitation is a clue. The little grey cells, they are busy, but there is much yet to uncover. What's next then? Hastings asked. Poirot's moustache twitched. We return to the scene of the crime. There are details yet to be observed. And then, mon ami, we shall test the hypotheses. As they walked back toward the manor, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the lawn. The mystery of Sir Reginald's death hung over Marwood Manor like a storm cloud, but Hercule Poirot's calm, methodical presence was a promise that the truth would soon be revealed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Poirot examining the study, questioning the staff, and poring over the train ticket and other small items he had collected. Hastings watched in awe as Poirot moved from one task to the next, his mind a whirl of calculations and connections. By evening, they were back in the drawing room, the fire once again casting a warm glow over the room. "Well, Poirot," Hastings said, stretching his legs, "you've grilled them all. What now?" Poirot sipped his tea, his expression serene. "Now, Hastings, we wait. The seeds have been planted. The guilty, they will reveal themselves, for the truth cannot remain hidden." From Hercule Poirot, Hastings shook his head, a grin spreading across his face. "You're a marvel, Poirot, an absolute marvel." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little grey cells, mon ami, they never fail." And so the day ended with the mystery still unsolved. But the wheels of Poirot's mind turning ever faster, drawing closer to the truth hidden within the walls of Marwood Manor. Chapter 4. Hypothesis. Weaving the web of possibilities, Hercule Poirot sat in the grand library of Marwood Manor, the air heavy with the scent of old leather and polished wood. The shelves towered around him, their contents a silent witness to the secrets of the house. A single lamp cast a warm glow over the table where he had spread out his notes. A meticulous array of scribbled observations from the crime scene and the interviews conducted thus far. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, sat across from him, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to keep pace with Poirot's agile mind. "Mon ami Poirot," began, his voice soft yet commanding, "we have reached the second step of my method, hypothesis. It is here, in this delicate stage, that we must weave a web of possibilities, no matter how improbable they may seem. The little grey cells, they must be free to imagine, to explore every avenue, to consider every motive, every opportunity." Hastings leaned forward, his pen poised over his notebook. "But Poirot, there are so many possibilities. Where do we even begin? Sir Reginald was a wealthy man, surely. The motives could be endless. Money, revenge, jealousy, Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. "You are correct, Hastings. The motives, they are many, but we must not be overwhelmed. We must construct our hypotheses with care, like a tailor stitching a fine suit. Each thread must be examined, tested, and placed with purpose. Let us begin with what we know." He tapped a finger on his notes, his movements precise. "Sir Reginald Marwood, a man of wealth and influence, was found dead in his locked study, stabbed with an antique dagger. The room, it was sealed, no windows open, no doors ajar, no signs of forced entry. This suggests, does it not, that the murderer was someone already within the manor?" Hastings nodded. "That narrows it down to the household, then. Lady Marwood, Charles, Eleanor, the butler Grayson, and that peculiar Dr. Varnier. We, and perhaps others among the staff, though they are less likely, but let us not limit ourselves too soon. The first hypothesis we must consider is the most obvious, a crime of passion or personal vendetta. Sir Reginald was a man of power, and power breeds enemies. Perhaps Lady Marwood, though she plays the grieving widow so well, harboured resentment. A marriage grown cold, perhaps, or a secret she wished to keep buried." Hastings frowned. "Lady Marwood, she seems devastated. I saw her weeping in the drawing-room this morning. Appearances, Hastings, are the mask of truth. A woman may weep and still hold a dagger in her heart. We must consider her motive. Did Sir Reginald, perhaps, intend to change his will? Or was there an infidelity, a betrayal that drove her to act?" Poirot paused, his fingers steepled before him. Then there is Charles, the ambitious son, a young man eager to inherit, perhaps too eager. His alibi, he was in London, has a crack, does it not? The train ticket you found in his room suggests he returned earlier than he claims. Why lie unless he has something to hide? Hastings scribbled furiously. You think Charles could have done it? For the money? Money is a powerful motive, mon ami, but not the only one. Perhaps Charles feared his father's disapproval, or a scandal that might ruin his prospects. We must also consider Eleanor, the daughter. She is quiet, reserved, but the quiet ones, they often hold the deepest secrets. Did she argue with her father, as the maid suggested? And if so, about what? Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, as if peering into the depths of his own mind. And then there is Dr. Varnier, the mysterious guest, a man with a past tied to Sir Reginald, a past that may hold bitterness. The cryptic letter we found in the desket mentioned a business deal, a loss. Could this be revenge? Hastings shook his head. But Poirot, the locked room, how could anyone have done it? The door was bolted from the inside, and the windows were secure. Patience, Hastings. The locked room is a puzzle, but not an unsolvable one. Let us construct another hypothesis. The murder was staged to appear impossible. Perhaps the killer used a trick, a hidden passage, a clever device, or even a manipulation of time. We must not assume the room was truly sealed until we have explored every possibility. Poirot rose and paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us weave another thread. Suppose the motive was not personal but professional. Sir Reginald was a titan of industry. His business dealings, they were not always clean, Nan. The hidden safe, its contents missing. Perhaps those documents were the key. Blackmail, perhaps, or evidence of fraud that someone wished to destroy. Hastings' eyes widened. You think someone killed him to keep those documents from coming to light? It is a possibility, and who might benefit from such secrecy? Charles, who stands to inherit the business. Eleanor, who may have been complicit in some scheme. Or even Grayson, the loyal butler, who knows more than he lets on. Poirot stopped pacing and turned to face Hastings. And we must not forget the dagger itself. An antique, a family heirloom. Why choose such a weapon? It is dramatic, Nan. Perhaps it was chosen to send a message, or to implicate someone specific. Dr. Varnier, for example, he is a collector of antiquities, is he not? Hastings rubbed his chin. You're right, that dagger feels personal. But if it was meant to frame Varnier, why wipe it clean of fingerprints? An excellent question, mon ami. Perhaps the killer wished to create confusion, too muddy the waters, or perhaps the lack of fingerprints is itself a clue, a sign of someone meticulous, someone who planned this crime with care. Poirot returned to the table and picked up a photograph, the torn one they had found in the fireplace. It showed Sir Reginald with a woman, her face partially obscured. And this, he said, holding it up, this is another thread in our web. Who is she? A mistress, a business associate, someone whose presence in Sir Reginald's life might have sparked jealousy or rage. Hastings leaned closer, squinting at the photograph. It's hard to tell, but she looks young. Could she be connected to one of the suspects? Perhaps. Or perhaps she's the key to it all. We must hypothesize that her identity is central to the motive. A lover scorned, a daughter betrayed, a partner in crime. Any of these could lead us to the truth. Poirot set the photograph down and began to organize his notes into neat piles. Let us summarize our hypotheses, Hastings. First, a crime of passion, Lady Marwood, driven by jealousy or betrayal. Second, a crime of greed, Charles, eager to secure his inheritance. Third, a crime of secrecy, Eleanor, hiding a personal or financial scandal. Fourth, a crime of revenge, Dr. Varnier, seeking retribution for a past wrong. Fifth, a crime of opportunity, Grayson, the butler, who knows the manor's secrets and perhaps used them to his advantage. And sixth, a crime of misdirection, the locked room itself, designed to confuse and mislead. Hastings stared at the list, his mind reeling. That's a lot to consider, Poirot. How do we even begin to sort through it all? By testing each thread, mon ami. In the next step, elimination, we will cut away the impossible, the improbable, until only the truth remains. But for now, we let the hypotheses breathe. We let them grow. We observe, we listen, we question. The little grey cells, they are at work. Poirot's eyes sparkled with determination as he continued to outline his approach. Over the next several hours, he and Hastings delved deeper into each hypothesis, exploring the nuances of the suspects' behaviors, their alibis, and their potential motives. The library became a crucible of ideas, each one carefully weighed and considered for Lady Marwood. Poirot hypothesized a scenario where Sir Reginald's infidelity or even the threat of disinheritance pushed her to act. She moves with grace, Hastings, but there is a steel beneath her grief. We must ask ourselves, what does she gain by his death? The estate, freedom, or perhaps revenge? For Charles, the focus was on his ambition. The son, he is impatient. He speaks of the business as if it is already his. But what if Sir Reginald planned to pass him over? Or worse, to expose some wrongdoing? The train ticketed is a small lie, but a lie nonetheless. Eleanor's reserved nature intrigued Poirot the most. She is like a closed book, Hastings, but every book has a story. The argument the maid overheard, what was it about? A secret she wished to keep hidden, a plan gone awry. Dr. Varnier's connection to Sir Reginald's past was a rich vein. Of speculation, the letter speaks of a deal, a loss. Varnier's demeanour, it is too controlled, too guarded. A man with nothing to hide does not watch his words so carefully. And Grayson, the butler, was not overlooked. He is the shadow of the manor, Hastings, always present, always watching. The smudge on the window paint, could it be his doing? And if so, why? As the hours passed, Poirot's hypotheses grew more intricate, weaving together the physical clues to dagger, the safe, the photographed with the psychological profiles of the suspects. He considered the possibility of a conspiracy where two or more worked together to eliminate Sir Reginald. Charles and Eleanor, perhaps, united by a shared secret. Or Grayson, loyal to one but not the other. Even Lady Marwood and Varnier, a partnership born of mutual gain. Hastings, struggling to keep up, suggested a break, but Poirot waved him off. Nan, Hastings, the mind, it is alive now. We must not interrupt its dance. Let us consider. The locked room once more. Suppose the bolt was tampered with, or the dagger was placed after the fact. We must hypothesize a method, a mechanism that allowed the killer to escape detection. They spent time exploring mechanical possibilities. Hidden spring in the door, a timed device, even the possibility that Sir Reginald was killed elsewhere and moved to the study. Each idea was tested against the evidence, and while some were dismissed, others were added to the growing web. By the time the clock struck midnight, Poirot had filled several pages with notes, each hypothesis a thread in the tapestry of the... Casey leaned back, satisfied for the moment. We have cast a wide net, Hastings. Now we must prepare to draw it in. Tomorrow we will begin to eliminate, to test, to probe. But for tonight we rest. The little grey cells, they need their repose. Hastings, exhausted but exhilarated, closed his notebook. You've given us quite a lot to think about, Poirot. I don't know how you keep it all straight. Poirot smiled, a small, knowing smile. It is not about keeping it straight, mon ami. It is about seeing the pattern, the shape of the truth beneath the chaos. That is the art of the hypothesis. As they left the library, the manor was silent, its secrets locked within its walls. But Poirot knew that with each hypothesis, he was one step closer to unravelling the mystery of Sir Reginald's death. The web was woven, and now it was time to see which threads would hold. Chapter 5. A tangled web of alibis. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Marwood Manor, casting long, dappled shadows across the oak-panelled dining room where Hercule Poirot sat, his posture impeccable, his moustache impeccably groomed. Captain Hastings, seated across from him, stirred his coffee with a touch too much vigour, his brow furrowed as he contemplated the events of the previous days. The murder of Sir Reginald Marwood hung over the manor like a storm cloud, and the air was thick with suspicion. Poirot, however, seemed almost serene, his sharp eyes scanning the room as the household gathered for breakfast, each member a potential piece in the intricate puzzle he was assembling. Poirot sipped his tisane, a fragrant blend of herbs that he insisted on having prepared to his exact specifications, and leaned back in his chair. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, his voice soft, but carrying that unmistakable note of authority. "Today we begin to unravel the alibis. It is in the contradictions, the little slips of the tongue, that the truth begins to emerge. The method. It progresses. Observation has been made. Hypotheses have been formed. Now we test these threads to see which hold and which fray." Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed his confusion. "But Poirot, everyone claims to have been elsewhere when Sir Reginald was killed. How do we even begin to sort through it all? It's a tangle, if you ask me." Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. "A tangle, yes, but one that can be undone with care. Each alibi is a story, and every story has its weaknesses. We shall examine them one by one, and you will see, Hastings, that the truth is not so elusive as it seems." The dining room was a study in contrasts. The opulent chandelier above glinted with crystal prisms, yet the mood was sombre, the clink of cutlery against china the only sound breaking the silence. Lady Marwood sat at the head of the table, her pale face composed but her hands trembling slightly as she lifted her teacup. Charles Marwood, the ambitious son, slouched in his chair, his eyes darting nervously toward the door. Eleanor, the secretive daughter, sat rigidly, her gaze fixed on her plate, though she had barely touched her food. The butler, Mr. Grayson, moved silently around the room, refilling cups and clearing plates with a practiced efficiency that belied the tension in his posture. Dr. Vanya, the mysterious guest, sat apart, his dark eyes scanning the others with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Poirot's first target was Charles Marwood. The young man's alibi had been delivered with a touch too much confidence the previous day. He claimed to have been in London on business, returning to the manor only after midnight, well after the estimated time of Sir Reginald's death. Poirot had noted the way Charles's fingers had fidgeted with his cufflinks as he spoke, a small but telling sign of unease. Mr. Charles Poirot began, his tone polite but probing. You mentioned yesterday that you were in London on the evening of your father's unfortunate demise. A business meeting, I believe you said. Charles straightened, his jaw tightening. That's right, Mr. Poirot. I had a meeting with some investors at the Savoy. It ran late, and I took the last train back. And this meeting, Poirot continued, his eyes narrowing slightly, it was of great importance, no doubt. You would have records, perhaps. A receipt from the Savoy, or a ticket stub from the train. Charles's face flushed, but he recovered. Quickly, I'm sure I have something. I don't keep every scrap of paper, you know. But I was there, and I can give you the names of the men I met with. Bon, Poirot said, nodding. And these men, they will confirm your presence. Until what hour? Until about 10, I'd say, Charles replied, his voice steady but his eyes flicking toward Eleanor for a fraction of a second. Then I caught the train at 11. Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook, his movements deliberate. Very well. And the train, it arrived at Marwood Station at what time? Midnight or just after, Charles said, his tone growing defensive. I took a cab from the station to the manor. You can ask the driver if you like. Indeed. I shall, Poirot said, his smile polite but unyielding. The details, they are most important, are they not? As Charles returned to his breakfast, Poirot's attention shifted to Lady Marwood. Her alibi was vaguer, a nighttime walk in the gardens to clear her mind after a disagreement with Sir Reginald. The story had struck Poirot as odd from the moment she told it. Why would a lady of her stature wander the gardens alone in the chill of an autumn evening? Lady Marwood, Poirot said, turning to her with a gentle incline of his head. Your walk in the gardens, it was most refreshing. I trust. You were alone, you said. Lady Marwood's teacup paused halfway to her lips. Yes, Mr. Poirot. I often walk when I need to think. Reginald and I. We had a small disagreement that evening. Nothing serious, you understand, but I needed some air. And you saw no one, heard nothing unusual. Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes were sharp, catching the slight tremor in her hand. No one, she said firmly. The gardens were quiet. I returned to my room around 10:30, I believe. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And your room, it is on the second floor, overlooking the gardens, yes. You would have passed the study on your way. Back inside, Lady Marwood hesitated, her lips parting slightly before she answered. I suppose so, but I didn't notice anything unusual. The house was quiet. Most interesting, Poirot murmured, jotting another note. He did not press further, but Hastings could see the wheels turning in his friend's mind. Lady Marwood's story was plausible, but its vagueness left room for doubt. And Poirot was not one to let such gaps go. UNEXAMINED. Next, Poirot turned his attention to Eleanor. The young woman had claimed to be in her room, reading, at the time of the murder. Her alibi was simple, almost too simple, and Poirot had noted the way her eyes avoided his when she spoke of it. Mademoiselle Eleanor. Poirot said, his voice soft but insistent. You were in your room, you say, engrossed in a book. May I ask what you were reading? A novel, perhaps, or something more scholarly? Eleanor's fork paused above her plate, and she looked up, her expression guarded. It was a novel, she said. Jane Austen, I think. Pride and Prejudice. I don't recall exactly. You don't recall? Poirot's eyebrows lifted slightly. A book so captivating, and yet it slips the mind. Most curious. And you heard nothing from the study, which is but 2 doors down the hall? Nothing. Eleanor said, her voice firm but her fingers tightening around her fork. I was focused on my reading. Poirot smiled, a small, enigmatic smile. Of course. The mind, it can be so absorbed, can it not? And yet, the ears, they sometimes hear what the mind does not register. As breakfast concluded, Poirot and Hastings retired to the library, where Poirot spread out his notes on a polished mahogany table. Hastings, he said, his voice low, the alibis, they are like a tapestry woven with threads of truth and deception. Charles's story of London, it is too convenient, too precise. Lady Marwood's walk, it lacks detail. And Eleanor, her reading, it does not convince me. We must dig deeper. Hastings frowned, running a hand through his hair. But how, Poirot? They all seem so certain of their stories, even if they don't quite add up. Where do we start? We start with the evidence, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. The train ticket Charles claims to have used, we shall verify it. Lady Marwood's walk, we shall examine the gardens for signs of her presence. And Eleanor's book, we shall see if it is indeed on her nightstand, or if it is a fiction of her own making. The rest of the morning was spent in pursuit of these threads. Poirot dispatched Hastings to the local station to inquire about the midnight train and any cabs that might have been hired. Meanwhile, Poirot himself took to the gardens, his small, polished shoes leaving faint imprints in the dew-soaked grass as he examined the paths Lady Marwood claimed to have walked. He noted the absence of footprints in the soft earth near the rose beds, where the ground was particularly damp, and the lack of any broken twigs or disturbed plants that might indicate someone had passed through in the dark dot at the station. Hastings returned with a small but significant find, a ticket stub, discarded near the platform for the 11 o'clock train from London to Marwood. The date matched the night of the murder, but the stub was crumpled, as if someone had tried to dispose of it hastily. It could belong to anyone, Hastings said, handing it to Poirot. But it's a start, isn't it? Poirot examined the ticket, his fingers tracing the creases. A start, yes, but not enough. We must know if Charles was truly on that train, and if so, who saw him. The cab driver, perhaps, will have a memory of his passenger. Back at the manor, Poirot made a discreet visit to Eleanor's room under the pretense of borrowing a book. The maid, flustered but cooperative, allowed him entry. The room was tidy, almost too tidy, with no sign of Pride and Prejudice or any other novel on the nightstand. Instead, Poirot found a small stack of letters tucked beneath a blotter on her desk, their edges slightly singed, as if someone had considered burning them but thought better of it. He did not disturb them yet, but made a mental note to return with a more thorough search by lunchtime. Poirot had gathered enough to confront the suspects again, this time with more pointed questions. He chose the drawing room, its high ceilings and heavy curtains, creating an atmosphere of gravity that suited his purpose. The household was summoned, and Poirot stood before them, his hands clasped behind his back, his demeanour calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice carrying a quiet intensity, "the alibis you have provided, they are like pieces of a puzzle, but some do not fit. Mr. Charles, your journey to London, it is most interesting, but the train ticket we have found suggests you may have returned earlier than you claim. Lady Marwood, your walk in the gardens, it leaves no trace. Most unusual for a lady who claims to have wandered for an hour. And Mademoiselle Eleanor, your novel, it is nowhere to be found. Perhaps you can enlighten me." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Charles's face reddened, and he opened his mouth to protest, but Poirot raised a hand. Nan, do not speak yet. I wish only to observe your reactions. The truth, it will reveal itself in time." Eleanor's eyes darted to Charles, a fleeting glance that Poirot did not miss. Lady Marwood's hands twisted in her lap, and Dr. Varnier, who had been silent throughout, leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Mr. Grayson, standing by the door, shifted uncomfortably, his polished shoes squeaking faintly against the floor as the afternoon wore on. Poirot continued his inquiries, each question a scalpel slicing through the layers of deception. He spoke with the cab driver, who vaguely recalled a passenger matching Charles's description but could not confirm the exact time. He examined the gardens again, this time finding a single pearl earring half buried near the conservatory, a clue that suggested someone had been there, but not necessarily Lady Marwood. And in Eleanor's room, under the guise of returning a borrowed book, Poirot retrieved one of the singed letters, its contents cryptic but suggestive of a financial arrangement gone awry. By evening, Poirot and Hastings sat once more in the library, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls. "It's a devil of a mess, Poirot," Hastings said, rubbing his temples. "Everyone's story has holes, but we're no closer to pinning it on anyone." Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Patience, Hastings. The holes, they are. The key, each lie points to a truth, and each truth brings us closer to the killer. Tomorrow we shall eliminate the impossible, and what remains, however improbable, will be the solution." The day had been long, and the manor seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Poirot's next move. The alibis, tangled though they were beginning to unravel, and Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells and his 5-step method, was ready to pull the final thread. Chapter 6. Elimination. Narrowing the field, Hercule Poirot sat in the grand library of Marwood Manor, his small, neatly manicured hands folded over his lap, his eyes half closed as if in a meditative trance. The room was a cavern of oak-panelled walls, lined with shelves that groaned under the weight of leather-bound tomes. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the Persian rug. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, paced near the tall windows, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. The rain outside had begun again, a steady patter that seemed to underscore the tension within the manor. Poirot's mind, however, was far from idle. His little grey cells, as he so fondly called them, were working at a feverish pace, sifting through the myriad details collected over the past 2 days. The locked study, the antique dagger, the misplaced book, the faint scent of perfume, the smudge on the window pane, all these fragments of evidence danced in his thoughts, forming patterns, dissolving and reforming again. He was now in the 3rd step of his famous 5-step method, elimination. This was the stage where impossibilities were cast aside, where the tangled web of possibilities began to take a clearer shape. It was, in Poirot's view, the moment when the truth, though still obscured, began to whisper its presence. "Hastings," Poirot said at last, his voice cutting through the silence like a finely honed blade. "You are restless, mon ami. It is not conducive to clear thinking. Come, sit. Let us review what we know and, more importantly, what we can eliminate." Hastings stopped pacing, his broad shoulders slumping slightly as he turned to face the diminutive detective. I don't know how you do it, Poirot, he said, running a hand through his hair. All these details, it's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. How do you know where to begin? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his mustache twitching slightly. The puzzle, Hastings, is never missing pieces. The pieces are always there, but they are often disguised, hidden in plain sight, or buried beneath the distractions of human nature. The key is to eliminate what cannot be true. In this way, the truth reveals itself. Hastings sank into a leather armchair opposite Poirot, his expression a mixture of admiration and exasperation. All right then, let's eliminate. What's impossible in this case? Poirot leaned forward, his green eyes gleaming with intensity. First, we must consider the locked room. Sir Reginald Marwood was found dead in his study, the door locked. From the inside, the windows bolted, and no sign of forced entry. The police, in their haste, concluded it could only be suicide. But we know better, do we not? The angle of the dagger, the absence of blood on Sir Reginald's hands, the very nature of the wound all point to murder. Hastings nodded, recalling the gruesome scene. Sir Reginald slumped over his desk, the dagger buried in his chest, the blood pooling beneath him. Yes, suicide doesn't fit. But how could anyone have entered or left that room? Precisement, Poirot said, tapping his fingers together. This is where we begin our elimination. Let us consider the possibility of an external intruder, someone from outside the manor, a stranger perhaps, or a hired assassin. What do we know? The manor is surrounded by a high wall, patrolled by groundskeepers. The gates were locked at night, and the dogs, those ferocious hounds Sir Reginald kept, did not bark. An intruder would have had to scale the wall, evade the dogs, and somehow enter a locked room without leaving a trace. This, Hastings, is highly improbable. Improbable, but not impossible, Hastings countered, his brow furrowing. What about a ladder or a rope? Someone could have climbed to the window. Poirot shook his head. None. The windows were bolted from the inside, and the smudge on the window pane, while curious, is not consistent with the force required to break in. Furthermore, the grounds outside the study were inspected. The flower beds beneath the windows were undisturbed, the earth soft from recent rain. No footprints, no signs of a ladder. We can eliminate the external intruder. Hastings leaned back, his mind racing. So, it had to be someone inside the manor. That narrows it down to the household lady, Marwood, Charles, Eleanor, the butler, Grayson, and that odd fellow, Dr. Varnier. Exactement, Poirot said, his voice laced with approval. And now we turn to the household. Each has an alibi, but alibis, mon ami, are like fine china, beautiful, but icily cracked under pressure. Let us examine them one by one. Poirot rose from his chair and began to pace, his movements deliberate, almost theatrical. He stopped before the fireplace, where the embers glowed red, and turned to face Hastings. First, Lady Marwood. She claims she was in her private sitting room, reading, at the time of the murder. She says she heard nothing unusual, only the sound of the storm outside. But consider, Hastings. Her sitting room is on the same floor as the study, separated by a mere corridor. Is it not curious that she heard nothing? A man stabbed in the chest would surely cry out, struggle, or at the very least, fall heavily. Hastings frowned. You think she's lying? Not necessarily lying, Poirot said, raising a finger, but perhaps selective in her recollection. We cannot yet eliminate her, but we note the inconsistency. Next, Charles Marwood, the son. He claims he was in London, attending a business meeting, and returned only after the murder was discovered. Yet, the train ticket found in his room suggests he returned earlier than he claims. Why the discrepancy? We must keep him in our sights. Eleanor, then Hastings said, warming to the task. The daughter, she says she was in her room, writing letters. But that made Jenny, wasn't it? Overheard an argument between Eleanor and Sir Reginald the night before. That's suspicious, surely, Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. Indeed, the argument is significant. Jenny reported that Eleanor was in a state, shouting about betrayal and ruining everything. We must ascertain what this betrayal was. Eleanor remains a strong possibility. And Grayson, the butler, Hastings continued. He says he was in the servants' quarters, organizing the silver. But that smudge on the window pane you said it matched his shoe polish. Could he have been in the study? A good observation, Hastings, Poirot said, his tone encouraging. The smudge is indeed Ascot, a prestigious racecourse in England, known for its elegance and high-profile racing events, is steeped in history and tradition. The term Ascot not only refers to the racecourse, but also evokes images of fashion, particularly the iconic Ascot hats worn by attendees. These hats, often elaborate and extravagant, are a hallmark of the event's social scene, especially during the famous Royal Ascot meeting, where royalty and high society gather. The smudge, a faint trace of black polish, suggests Grayson was near the window, perhaps cleaning or inspecting it. But why? Was it part of his duties, or something more sinister? We cannot eliminate him yet. And Dr. Varnier, Hastings added, his voice tinged with suspicion, that mysterious guest. He says he was in the guest wing, reviewing medical papers. But that letter we found in Sir Reginald's desk mentioned him, didn't it? Something about a past scandal. Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. Dr. Varnier is an enigma. The letter hinted at a business deal gone wrong, a loss of fortune. This gives him a motive revenge, perhaps, or desperation. His alibi is weak, as he was alone. We keep him in the frame. Hastings rubbed his temples, overwhelmed by the complexity. So, we haven't eliminated anyone yet, Poirot. They all could have done it. Not so, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. We have eliminated the impossible, the external intruder. Now, we focus on the possible. The locked room suggests an inside job, and the forensic evidence gives us another clue. The dagger, you recall, was wiped clean of fingerprints. This is not the act of a panicked amateur, but of someone calculating, someone who knew to cover their tracks. This points to premeditation. Hastings nodded slowly. So, it was planned. But the locked room, how did they get in and out? That, mon ami, is the heart of the mystery, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. But let us not rush. Elimination is a patient process. We must now consider the physical evidence more closely. The dagger, for instance. It is an antique, part of Sir Reginald's collection, displayed in the study. Whoever used it knew it was there, which again points to someone familiar with the room. Poirot paused, his gaze drifting to the window, where the rain streaked down in rivulets. There is another possibility we must eliminate, he said softly. The locked room may not be as impenetrable as it seems. This morning I examined the door and windows more closely. The lock on the door is old, a pin-tumbler design. It is possible, though not certain, that it could be manipulated from the outside with the right tools. A A skilled individual could have locked it after the deed. You mean a lockpick? Hastings asked, his eyes widening. Perhaps, Poirot said, or something simpler, duplicate key, perhaps, or a trick of the mechanism. We must investigate the household staff further. Grayson, as butler, would have access to keys, and Charles, as the son, might know the manor secrets. Hastings leaned forward, his interest piqued. So, we need to check if anyone had the means to lock the door after the murder. Exactement, Poirot said. But there is more. The smudge on the window pane troubles me. It is not merely shoe polish. Is fresh, applied the night of the murder. Grayson's duties do not typically include cleaning windows at midnight. This suggests he was in the study, or near it, at a critical time. We must question him further. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the library door. It was Jenny, the maid, her face pale and her hands twisting nervously in her apron. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, I couldn't help but overhear your talk earlier about the argument. I didn't tell you everything." Poirot's eyes sharpened, and he gestured for her to sit. "Speak, mademoiselle. The truth is the only path to justice." Jenny hesitated, then spoke in a rush. It wasn't just an argument. Miss Eleanor Shea was furious with Sir Reginald. "I heard her say, 'If you go through with this, it'll ruin us all.' And he shouted back, 'I'll not be blackmailed by my own daughter.' It was awful, sir." Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot, his heart pounding. "Blackmail," he whispered. "That's a motive, Poirot, indeed." Poirot said, his voice low and thoughtful, "This changes much. Eleanor's anger, her talk of whodunit, suggests a secret, one Sir Reginald threatened to expose. We must learn what it was." Jenny swallowed hard. "There's more, sir. I saw Miss Eleanor near the study that night after the argument. She was holding something. I couldn't see what, but she looked frightened." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sure sign his mind was racing. "Mercy, Jenny, you have done well to tell us this. You may go." As the maid hurried out, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice urgent. "This is big, Poirot. Eleanor was there, near the study, after a row with her father, and she was holding something, maybe the dagger." "Calm yourself, Hastings," Poirot said, though his eyes betrayed his excitement. "We do not yet know what she held. It could be the dagger, or it could be something else, a letter, a key, or even the contents of the safe. We must eliminate these possibilities one by one." Poirot returned to his chair, his fingers steepled before him. "Let us summarize. What we have eliminated. The external intruder is impossible. The suicide theory is impossible. The murder was premeditated, committed by someone within the household who knew the study and its contents. This leaves us with Lady Marwood, Charles, Eleanor, Grayson, and Dr. Varnier. Each has a potential motive, and each has an alibi that is less than ironclad." He paused, his gaze distant. "But there is another element we must consider, the missing contents of the safe. If, as we suspect, they were documents, they may hold the key to the motive. We must find them, or evidence of what they contained." Hastings nodded, though his mind was spinning. "Where do we go from here, Poirot?" "We proceed methodically," Poirot said. "We question Grayson about the smudge and his movements that night. We press Eleanor about the argument and what she held, and we search for any trace of the safe's contents, perhaps in Charles's room, or Eleanor's, or even Dr. Varnier's. The truth is close, Hastings. but it is like a shadowy elusive, until we shine the light of reason upon it. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of activity. Poirot, with Hastings at his side, moved through Marwood Manor like a bloodhound on the scent. They began with Grayson, summoning him to the library under the pretense of discussing household routines. The butler, a tall, gaunt man with a perpetually stoic expression, stood stiffly before them, his hands clasped behind his back. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild, "you are a man of order, are you not? The silver polished, the linens pressed, the manner running like a Swiss clock. Yet I find it curious that your shoe polish was found on the window pane of the study, the night of Sir Reginald's murder. Can you explain this?" Grayson's composure faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. I was inspecting the windows, Monsieur Poirot. The storm had been fierce, and I wished to ensure no leaks had occurred. At midnight, Poirot asked, his eyebrow arching, an unusual time for such diligence. Grayson's jaw tightened. "It is my duty to maintain the manor, sir. I often work late." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And did you enter the study? Did you see Sir Reginald?" "No, sir," Grayson said quickly. "The door was locked. I merely checked the window from the outside." Hastings leaned forward, unable to contain himself. "But the smudge was inside. Grayson, how do you explain that?" Grayson's eyes darted to the side, a bead of sweat forming on his brow. I may have checked the window earlier in the evening, sir. I clean many surfaces daily. It could have been from then." Poirot's smile was thin, almost predatory. "We shall verify this, Monsieur Grayson. For now, you may go, but do not leave the manor." As Grayson departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. "He's hiding something, Poirot. I'd bet my hat on it." "Patience, Hastings," Poirot said. "We have not eliminated him, but we have not condemned him either. Let us now speak with Mademoiselle Eleanor." Eleanor Marwood was found in the conservatory, surrounded by blooming orchids and the scent of damp earth. She was a striking woman, with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to carry a weight of secrets. She rose as Poirot and Hastings entered, her posture rigid. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "we must speak of the night your father died. You were heard arguing with him, speaking of betrayal and ruin. What was this about?" Eleanor's face paled, but her voice was steady. "It was a family matter, Monsieur Poirot, a disagreement about business decisions." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A disagreement that led to shouts of blackmail. Come, mademoiselle, you must be candid. Jenny saw you near the study that night, holding something. What was it?" Eleanor's hands clenched, her knuckles white. "I was holding a letter, monsieur." "Poirot, a personal letter from my father." "It was a family matter, as I said. A letter you burned, perhaps." Poirot pressed, or hid. "We found a torn photograph in the fireplace, and the safe's contents are missing. These are not trivial matters." Eleanor's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I didn't kill him. I loved my father, despite our disagreements. I was in my room when it happened." "Then why were you near the study?" Hastings interjected, his tone sharp. "And what was in that letter?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she straightened, regaining control. "It was a private matter. I will not discuss it further." Poirot studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, mademoiselle. But the truth will not remain hidden for long." As they left the conservatory, Hastings was practically vibrating with frustration. She's lying, Poirot. Or at least not telling us everything. That letter, what could it be? Perhaps a clue to the safe's contents, Poirot said thoughtfully. Or perhaps something more personal. We must search her room and Charles's, discreetly. The search was conducted that evening with the assistance of the Manners housekeeper, who was loyal to Lady Marwood, but cooperative under Poirot's charm. In Eleanor's room, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, they found a small, locked diary. Poirot, with a deft touch, opened it using a hairpin borrowed from the housekeeper. The diary was written in coda, simple substitution cipher, which Poirot promised to decipher later in Charles's room. They found nothing conclusive, though a faint scent of the same perfume Poirot had noted in the study lingered in the air. Curious, Poirot murmured. The perfume links Eleanor to the crime scene, but Charles's room carries its echo. There is a connection here, Hastings. By nightfall, Poirot and Hastings returned to the library, the diary in hand. Poirot set to work decoding it, his pencil flying across a notepad as he muttered to himself. After an hour, he leaned back, his face alight with triumph. The diary, Hastings, he said, details a plan. Eleanor and Charles were defrauding Sir Reginald's business partners, siphoning funds through false invoices. Sir Reginald discovered this and threatened to expose them. The letter Jenny saw was likely his ultimatum to them. Hastings' jaw dropped. So, they had a motive to kill him. But the locked room, how, the Poirot said, is what we must now deduce. But we have eliminated much. The murderer is within the household, motivated by fear of exposure. The net is tightening, mon ami. As the rain continued to fall outside, Poirot leaned back in his chair, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The truth was close, but it required one final push, a revelation that would lay bare the secrets of Marwood Manor. Chapter 7. The shadow of the past Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library of Marwood Manor, his small, precise hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly as he surveyed the towering shelves of leather-bound books. The room was a monument to Sir Reginald Marwood's wealth and status, its oak-panelled walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow every movement. The air carried the faint scent of old paper and polished wood, mingling with the lingering tension of a house steeped in tragedy. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, stood near the fireplace, his brow furrowed as he watched Poirot pace slowly along the shelves, his polished shoes clicking softly against the parquet floor. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Hastings with a gleam in his eye. The past, it is like a shadow, always there, always shaping the present, yet so often unseen until one shines a light upon it. Sir Reginald's murder, it is not a thing of the moment. No, no. It is rooted in what has come before. We must uncover the shadow of his past to understand the truth of his death. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed a flicker of confusion. You mean his business dealings, Poirot, or perhaps something personal? The man was rich as Croesus. Surely he had enemies. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or exasperation. Hastings could never quite tell. Enemies, yes, Hastings, but not the kind you imagine, perhaps. A man like Sir Reginald, he does not amass such wealth without crossing paths with those who bear grudges. But it is not enough to say enemies. We must know who and why and how far back the grudge extends. The little grey cells, they must work to uncover this. The investigation had reached a critical juncture. The locked study where Sir Reginald had met his ender, single, precise stab wound from an antique dagger, remained an enigma. The room's heavy oak door had been bolted from the inside, the windows latched, and no trace of an intruder had been found. Yet Poirot's meticulous examination in the days prior had revealed tantalizing clues. A misplaced book on the study shelf, a faint trace of perfume, a smudge of dirt on the window pane. And then there was the hidden safe, concealed behind a portrait of Sir Reginald's grandfather, its contents mysteriously gone. These were the threads Poirot now sought to weave into a coherent tapestry. The morning was crisp, the autumn light, filtering through the library's tall windows, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot had requested access to Sir Reginald's personal papers, a task that Lady Marwood, the widow, had reluctantly agreed to. She sat now in a back chair near the window, her pale hands folded in her lap, her face a mask of grief, or perhaps, Poirot thought, something more guarded. Her dark mourning dress contrasted sharply with her fair skin, and her eyes, though red-rimmed, held a sharpness that belied her delicate appearance. Lady Marwood, Poirot began, his voice smooth and measured. I must ask you to assist me in a matter most delicate. The papers of Sir Reginald, his correspondence, his business records, they may hold the key to understanding why he was taken from us so cruelly. Lady Marwood's lips tightened, and for a moment Poirot thought she might refuse. But then she rose, smoothing her dress with a practised motion. Of course, Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low but steady. I will have Mr. Grayson bring the files from Reginald's study, though I warn you, he was a private man. His papers may not reveal as much as you hope. Poirot inclined his head, his eyes never leaving her face. Privacy, madame, is often a curtain behind which the truth hides. I am most adept at parting such curtains. As Lady Marwood left to summon the butler, Hastings leaned closer to Poirot. Do you think she's hiding something, Poirot? She seems awfully composed for a woman who's just lost her husband. Poirot raised a finger, his expression thoughtful. Composure, Hastings, is not always a sign of indifference. It may be a shield, or it may be that she has learned to conceal her true feelings. We shall see. For now, we turn to the papers. Mr. Grayson, the butler, entered shortly after, carrying a heavy wooden box filled with neatly organized files. His gaunt face was impassive, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hands as he set the box on the library table. These are Sir Reginald's personal records, sir, Grayson said, his voice clipped, as per her ladyship's instructions. Mercy. Mr. Grayson, Poirot replied, already lifting the lid of the box. You have been most helpful. Tell me, did Sir Reginald often work with these papers late into the night? Grayson hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the door. Occasionally. Sir, he was a man of great responsibility. His work often kept him in the study until the early hours, and the night of his death. Poirot pressed, his tone deceptively casual. Did you see him working then? Grayson's jaw tightened. I retired to my quarters at 10 o'clock. Sir, I saw nothing unusual. Poirot nodded, dismissing the butler with a polite smile. But as Grayson left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, he knows more than he says. Mon ami, the eyes, they betray him. The files were a treasure trove of Sir Reginald's life, it seemed, filled with ambition, triumph, and no small amount of ruthlessness. Poirot and Hastings spent hours poring over contracts, letters, and financial ledgers, the room growing dim as the afternoon waned. Among the documents were records of Sir Reginald's business ventures, many of which involve partnerships with influential figures across England and beyond. One name appeared repeatedly: Dr. Claude Varnier, the mysterious guest who had been staying at Marwood Manor the night of the murder. Varnier, Hastings said, holding up a yellowed contract. This says he and Sir Reginald were partners in a shipping venture 10 years ago. Looks like it went south. Varnier lost everything when the company collapsed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A motive, perhaps. A man who loses his fortune may harbour a grudge that festers over time. And yet, Dr. Varnier is a guest in this house. Why would Sir Reginald invite a man he ruined to stay under his roof? Hastings frowned. Hospitality. Or maybe Varnier wormed his way back in, looking for revenge. Revenge, Poirot mused, tapping his chin. It is a powerful force, but it requires opportunity. An opportunity in a locked room is not so easily found. We must dig deeper. As they continued their search, Poirot uncovered a series of letters exchanged between Sir Reginald and Varnier, written in the aftermath of the failed venture. The tone was cordial at first, but Varnier's letters grew increasingly bitter, accusing Sir Reginald of betrayal and fraud. The final letter, dated 5 years prior, ended with a chilling promise: "You will answer for what you have done, Reginald. One day the scales will be balanced." Hastings let out a low whistle. "That's practically a threat, Poirot. Do you think Varnier's been biding his time all these years?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned his attention to a small, leather-bound notebook tucked among the files. Its pages were filled with Sir Reginald's meticulous handwriting, detailing meetings, transactions, and cryptic notes about insurance and protection. One entry caught Poirot's eye: "Varnier seeks restitution. Documents secured. In safe. Must ensure they remain hidden." "The safe," Poirot said softly, his fingers tracing the words. "The contents of the safe, they are the key. Whatever was taken, it was worth killing for." Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager. "Do you think Varnier stole them? Maybe he used the murder as a cover to get those documents." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone cautious. "But we must not leap to conclusions, Hastings. The little grey cells, they demand order, method. We must follow the clues, not chase shadows." The investigation took a new turn as Poirot requested. A tour of the Manor's less frequented areas, suspecting that Sir Reginald's secrets might be tied to the house itself. Lady Marwood, ever the gracious hostess, assigned Mr. Grayson to guide them. The butler led them through dusty corridors and unused rooms, his demeanour growing increasingly stiff as they approached the older wing of the manor. "This part of the house is rarely used," Grayson said, his voice echoing in the dimly lit hallway. Sir Reginald preferred the modern additions. Poirot's eyes scanned the walls, noting the faded tapestries and creaking floorboards. And yet, a house such as this, it holds its secrets tightly. "Tell me, Mr. Grayson, are there any passages, perhaps, hidden ways known only to the family or the staff?" Grayson's face paled, but he shook his head. "None that I'm aware of, sir. This is an old house, but I've never heard of such things." Poirot smiled thinly. "Of course, but an old house, it has a way of revealing what it wishes to conceal." Their tours ended in a small, forgotten room at the end of the wing, its windows boarded up and its furniture covered in dust sheets. Poirot paused, his gaze fixed on a large, ornate bookcase that seemed out of place in the otherwise neglected space. He ran his fingers along the edge, pressing gently, and was rewarded with a soft click. The bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage cloaked in darkness. Hastings gasped. "Good Lord, Poirot, a secret passage." Poirot's expression was grim. "Indeed, Hastings, and where there is a secret passage, there is opportunity. This changes everything." The passage was cramped and musty, its stone walls damp with age. Poirot and Hastings followed it cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust underfoot. The passage wound through the manor's walls, eventually emerging behind a heavy tapestry in Sir Reginald's study, the very room where he had been killed. "So," Hastings said, his voice hushed, "someone could have entered the study without using the door or windows." "Precisement," Poirot replied. "The locked room, it is no longer a mystery. But who used this passage, and why? That is the question." They examined the study's end of the passage, finding faint scuff marks on the floor and a single tiny pearl caught in a crack in the wood. Poirot held it up to the light, his eyes narrowing. "A pearl, Hastings. From a necklace, perhaps, or an earring. It belongs to someone who has been here, someone who did not wish to be seen." Back in the library, Poirot sat at the table, his hands steepled before him, his mind racing. The discovery of the passage was a breakthrough, but it raised as many questions as it answered. Who had known about it? The family, the staff, and what of the missing documents from the safe? Were they the motive for the murder, or merely a convenient theft? As evening fell, Poirot requested a private meeting with Dr. Varnier. The man was an enigma, former physician turned businessman, now reduced to a shadow of his former self. He entered the library with a guarded expression, his dark eyes wary. As he faced Poirot, "Monsieur Varnier," Poirot began, his tone polite but firm. "I have read the letters you sent to Sir Reginald. They speak of a great wrong done to you. Tell me, what was the nature of your grievance?" Varnier's jaw clenched, but he spoke calmly. "Reginald ruined me, Monsieur Poirot. Our shipping venture was my life's work, my fortune. He manipulated the accounts, shifted the blame, and left me with nothing. I came here to confront him, to demand what was rightfully mine, and the documents in the safe." Poirot asked, his voice soft but piercing. "Did they contain proof of this betrayal?" Varnier hesitated, then nodded. "I believe so. Reginald hinted as much. He said he kept records of our dealings, records that would protect him. I wanted them back, but I swear I did not." "Kill him." Poirot studied the man for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, monsieur. But know this, the truth, it cannot be hidden from Hercule Poirot." As Varnier left, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "Do you believe him, Poirot? He's got every reason to want Sir Reginald dead." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Belief, Hastings, is a luxury we cannot afford. We must rely on facts. And the facts, they tell me that this passage, this pearl, and these missing documents are pieces of a puzzle that is not yet complete." The night was quiet, the manor cloaked in an uneasy silence. Poirot sat alone in his room, a single candle casting flickering shadows on the walls. He closed his eyes, letting his mind sift through the clues, the misplaced book, the perfume, the smudge, the pearl, the passage, the missing documents. Each was a thread, and somewhere in the shadow of Sir Reginald's past, they would converge to reveal the killer. But the shadow was long, and the truth still eluded him, for now. Chapter 8, Step 4, Deduction. The truth takes shape. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Marwood Manor, casting long, wavering shadows across the oak-panelled walls of the dining room. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his small, precise hands folded neatly before him, his moustache impeccably trimmed, and his eyes gleaming with the quiet intensity of a man who had begun to see the threads of truth weaving together. Captain Hastings, seated to his right, sipped his coffee, his brow furrowed as he tried to keep pace with Poirot's relentless mental machinery. The rest of the household, Lady Marwood, Charles, Eleanor, Mr. Grayson, and Dr. Varnier ate their breakfast in uneasy silence, their glances darting nervously toward the diminutive detective. Poirot had reached the fourth step of his method. Deduction, the clues, painstakingly gathered, were now forming a pattern in his mind, like pieces of a mosaic falling into place. The perfume, faint but unmistakable, lingering in the study where Sir Reginald had met his end. The smudge on the window pane, a curious mark that matched the polish used on Mr. Grayson's shoes. The hidden passage, discovered only yesterday, which connected the study to Charles's bedroom, and now the blood-stained glove Hastings had stumbled upon in the gardener. Clumsy mistake by someone who thought they had covered their tracks. These were no longer isolated fragments. They were the scaffolding of a conspiracy, and Poirot was determined to deduce its shape. Mon ami, Poirot said, turning to Hastings with a slight tilt of his head, the time has come to move beyond the chaos of possibilities. We have observed, we have hypothesized, we have eliminated the impossible. Now we deduce the truth. It is like a fine tapestry, requires patience to see the design, but once seen, it cannot be unseen. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed his confusion. I say, Poirot, you've got me in a bit of a muddle. That glove we found, surely it's the key to the whole thing. It had blood on it, after all. Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. The glove, Hastings, is but one thread. Important but alone it tells us nothing. It is the combination, the perfume, the smudge, the passage, the glove that begins to speak. And speak it does, if one listens with the little grey cells. The dining room door creaked open, and the maid, Clara, entered with a fresh pot of tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured, her eyes flickering toward Eleanor, who sat rigidly at the far end of the table, her face pale and her fingers clutching her napkin. Poirot noted this, his gaze sharpening. Clara, he recalled, had overheard an argument between Eleanor and her father the night before the murder. A small detail, but one that had lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. Mercy, Clara Poirot said smoothly, accepting a cup of tea. You have been most helpful this morning. Tell me, do you often polish the shoes of Mr. Grayson? Clara froze, her eyes widening. I beg your pardon, sir. The shoes, Poirot repeated, his voice gentle but insistent. The polish. It has a distinctive scent, does it not? One might even say it leaves a mark. The room fell silent. Mr. Grayson, the butler, stiffened in his chair, his usual composure faltering for a fraction of a second. Charles, sitting beside him, coughed and reached for his water glass, his movements jerky. Eleanor's eyes darted to her brother, then back to her plate. Lady Marwood, ever the picture of elegance, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Dr. Varnier, the mysterious guest, merely sipped his coffee, his expression unreadable. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Mr. Poirot, Clara stammered, her cheeks flushing. I polish the shoes as I'm told, that's all. Of course, Poirot said, waving a hand dismissively. It is of no consequence, for now. As Clara hurried from the room, Hastings leaned toward Poirot and whispered, What was that about? You've got them all on edge. Precise, Poirot murmured. The guilty, they are like the strings of a violin. Pluck one, and the others vibrate. We must observe these vibrations, Hastings, for they will lead us to the truth. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private meeting with Inspector Japp, who had arrived from Scotland Yard to oversee the investigation. The two men met in the library, a grand room lined with leather-bound books and heavy velvet curtains. Japp, a burly man with a nonsense demeanour, paced the room as Poirot sat in an armchair, his hands steepled beneath his chin. "Well, Poirot," Japp said, "you've been poking around this place for days. Got anything solid, or is it all just your fancy theories?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "My dear Japp, a theory is only fancy until it is proven, and I assure you we are very close to proof. The smudge on the window pane, for instance, did." "Your men analyze it?" Japp grunted. "Aye, they did. It's shoe polish, all right. The same kind used by the butler, Grayson. But that doesn't mean much on its own. Half the staff might use the same polish." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but consider this. The smudge was on the inside of the window, in a room that was locked. How does one explain such a mark, unless someone within the household was at the window after the murder?" Japp stopped, pacing, his eyes narrowing. "You're saying Grayson was in the study?" "I say nothing yet," Poirot replied. "I merely deduce. The smudge, it suggests movement, perhaps an attempt to open the window, or to leave a mark as a signal. And the hidden passage, Japp of you, explored its implications." Japp nodded. "We've had a look. It leads from the study to Charles Marwood's bedroom. Clever bit of architecture, but it doesn't prove Charles did it." "No." Poirot agreed, "but it narrows the field. The passage, the smudge, the glove, these are not accidents. They are the fingerprints of intent, left by those who thought themselves cleverer than Hercule Poirot." Japp chuckled. "You're a cocky one, I'll give you that. So, what's next? You going to round them all up and do one of your big reveals?" "Not yet," Poirot said, rising from his chair. "The tapestry is not complete. There is one more thread to pull the perfume. I must speak with Mademoiselle Eleanor." Eleanor Marwood was in the conservatory, tending to a tray of orchids. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, as she snipped dead leaves with a pair of small shears. When Poirot entered, she glanced up, her green eyes guarded. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool. "To what do I owe this visit?" Poirot smiled, his manner disarming. "I wished to admire your orchids, mademoiselle. They are exquisite, like yourself. But I confess, I have another purpose. The perfume you wear it is distinctive, Nan. A blend of jasmine and something else. Perhaps sandalwood?" Eleanor's hand paused mid-snip. "I suppose so. It's a custom blend. Why do you ask?" "Because," Poirot said, stepping closer, "that same scent was in your father's study the night he died. A curious coincidence, would you not agree?" Eleanor's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "I was in the study earlier that day, discussing business with father. It's not surprising my perfume lingered." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone mild, "but the scent was strong, as if someone had been there at the time of the murder. And yet, you claim you were in your room, alone." "I was," Eleanor snapped, her composure slipping. "I don't know what you're implying, Monsieur Poirot, but I loved my father." "I would never, of course," Poirot interrupted, raising a hand. "I imply nothing. I merely observe, and I deduce. The truth, mademoiselle. It will reveal itself in time. As Poirot left the conservatory, he felt a familiar thrill of being close to the heart of the mystery. Eleanor's reaction had been telling. She was hiding something, but what? And how did it connect? To Charles, to Grayson, to the hidden passage. The answers were there, waiting to be uncovered. That afternoon, Poirot and Hastings took a walk through the manor's sprawling gardens, where the blood-stained glove had been found. The garden was a labyrinth of manicured hedges and rosebeds, with a small fountain at its centre. Poirot paused, by the spot where the glove had been discovered, half buried in the soil beneath a rose bush. "Hastings," Poirot said, crouching to examine the ground, "you have done well to find this glove. It is a clumsy mistake, but a revealing one. The blood, it is Sir Reginald's. That's what Japp's men said," Hastings replied. "But whose glove is it? It's too small for Charles or Grayson." "Precisement," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "It is a lady's glove, is it not? And yet it was found here, far from the house, as if someone wished to dispose of it quickly." "You think it's Eleanor's?" Hastings asked, his voice low. Poirot stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "I think, Hastings, that we are dealing with more than one mind. The murder of Sir Reginald was not the act of a single person. There is a conspiracy, a web of deceit spun by those who believed they could outwit justice." Back in the manor, Poirot requested a private audience with Charles Marwood. The young man was in the billiard room, idly knocking balls across the table, his face a mask of forced nonchalance. When Poirot entered, Charles straightened, his jaw tightening. "What now, Poirot?" Charles said, his tone sharp. "More of your little questions." "Only one," Poirot said, his voice calm. "The hidden passage, Monsieur Charzette, leads to your bedroom. A most convenient route, Nan. Perhaps you used it to visit your father's study on the night he died." Charles's face reddened. "That's absurd. I didn't even know about the passage until your lot found it. And I was in London that night. Ask anyone." "The train ticket," Poirot said, producing the crumpled ticket from his pocket. "Found in your room, dated the day of the murder. But tell me, monsieur, why does the ticket show a return journey the same evening? You were back at Marwood Manor by midnight, were you not?" Charles's hand froze on the billiard cue. "I came back early. Business, you know. Nothing to do with father's death." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course, business. But the passage, the ticket, the glove, these things, they do not lie. They speak, and I listen." As Poirot left the billiard room, he felt the pieces of the puzzle sliding into place. The perfume pointed to Eleanor. The smudge pointed to Grayson. The passage and the ticket pointed to Charles. And the glove was the key, tying them all together. But there was still one missing piece, the contents of the hidden safe. What had Sir Reginald been protecting, and why had it been worth his life? That evening, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room for what he called a small discussion. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with suspicion. Lady Marwood sat in an armchair, her posture regal but her eyes wary. Eleanor fidgeted with her bracelet, her gaze fixed on the floor. Charles leaned against the mantelpiece, his arms crossed, while Grayson stood by the door, his face impassive. Dr. Varnier, the outsider, sat apart, his dark eyes watching Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "My friends," Poirot began, standing before the fireplace, "we are close to the truth. The murder of Sir Reginald Marwood was no act of impulse. It was planned, executed with precision, and covered with care. But the guilty, they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot, the clues, they betray you. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The perfume in the study, it is yours, Mademoiselle Eleanor. The smudge on the window, it matches the polish of Monsieur Grayson's shoes. The hidden passage, it leads to the room of Monsieur Charles. And the glove, stained with Sir Reginald's blood, it is a lady's glove found in the garden, where it was meant to be lost. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Charles took a step forward, his fists clenched. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "You've got no proof." "Proof," Poirot said, his voice soft but cutting. "The proof, it is in the details. The little grey cells, they do not lie. And they tell me that this crime was not the work of one, but of many. A conspiracy mise amis to silence Sir Reginald and protect a secret worth killing for." Lady Marwood's voice broke the silence. "What secret, Monsieur Poirot? What are you suggesting?" Poirot turned to her, his eyes steady. "The contents of the safe, madame, they are gone, but they were the heart of this crime. Documents, perhaps, that threatened to ruin someone or several someones. I will find them, and when I do, the truth will be revealed." As the household dispersed, their faces a mixture of fear and defiance, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The trap was being set. The guilty were nervous, their carefully constructed alibis unraveling. But he needed one final piece, the documents from the safe. Without them, his deductions were incomplete. Late that night, Poirot sat in his room, a single lamp casting a warm glow over his notebook. He had written out the clues, the connections, the deductions, the perfume, the smudge, the passage, the glove, the ticket. They all pointed to a collaboration between Eleanor, Charles, and Grayson. But why? What had Sir Reginald known that made his death necessary? And where were the documents? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Hastings, his face pale. "Poirot, I've just seen something odd. Dr. Varnier, he was in the library, rummaging through the books. I think he was looking for something." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Varnier, you say? Most interesting. Perhaps he, too, seeks the missing documents. Come, Hastings, we must act quickly." The two men moved silently through the darkened manor, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpets. The library was empty when they arrived, but a single book lay open on the table, a volume of Shakespeare, its pages yellowed with age. Poirot flipped through it, his fingers pausing on a page marked with a faint pencil line. "The truth will out," Poirot murmured, reading the underlined passage. "How fitting, but what truth, I wonder?" He examined the book closely, running his fingers along the spine. With a soft click, a small compartment opened, revealing a folded piece of paper. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes scanning the contents. "It is a letter," he said, his voice low, "from Sir Reginald to his solicitor. It speaks of a frauder scheme to defraud his business partners, orchestrated by Charles and Eleanor. And there is a name here, Dr. Varnier. He was their victim." "It seems," Hastings gasped. "So Varnier had a motive, after all." "Perhaps," Poirot said, folding the letter and slipping it into his pocket. "But motive alone does not make a murderer. We must be certain, Hastings. Tomorrow we will set the final trap." As they returned to their rooms, Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. The letter was a crucial piece, but it was not the whole picture. The safe's contents were still missing, and Dr. Varnier's actions suggested he knew more than he let on. The truth was close, so close, Poirot could almost touch it. But he needed one final push to bring it into the light. The next morning, Poirot requested a meeting with Dr. Varnier. The doctor was in the morning room, reading a newspaper, his demeanor calm but his eyes wary. "Monsieur Varnier," Poirot said, seating himself opposite the doctor, "you are a man of secrets, are you not? A man who has lost much, perhaps because of Sir Reginald Marwood." Varnier's face tightened. "I don't know what you mean, Poirot. I'm just a guest here." "A guest," Poirot said, "who searches the library in the dead of night. A guest who lost his fortune in a business deal with Sir Reginald. Deal that was not as it seemed. Tell me, monsieur, what do you know of the documents in the safe?" Varnier's hands clenched the arms of his chair. "You're fishing, Poirot. I don't know anything about any documents, Nan," Poirot said, producing the letter from his pocket. "Then perhaps you will explain this. A letter from Sir Reginald, naming you as the victim of a fraud perpetrated by his children. You had reason to hate him, did you not?" Varnier's face went pale, but he shook his head. "I didn't kill him, Poirot. I wanted justice, yes, but not like that." Poirot studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you, monsieur, but you will help me. The truth, it must be revealed, as—" Varnier hesitated. Poirot felt a surge of certainty. The doctor was not the killer, but he was a piece of the Pazula witness to the fraud that had driven Charles and Eleanor to murder. The final step, revelation, was approaching. Poirot would gather the household once more, lay his trap, and watch the guilty betray themselves. The day passed in a flurry of activity. Poirot met with Japp to discuss the letter, which confirmed the fraud but did not name the killer. He examined the hidden passage again, noting its narrow walls and the faint scratches that suggested frequent use. He spoke with Clara, who admitted to seeing Grayson near the study on the night of the murder, though she had been too frightened to mention it before. By evening, Poirot was ready. He stood in the drawing room, the household gathered before him, their faces a mixture of dread and anticipation. Hastings stood by his side, his notebook clutched tightly. Japp and 2 constables waited in the hall, ready to act. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. "The time has come to end this charade. The murder of Sir Reginald Marwood was a crime of greed, of betrayal, of conspiracy. The clues, they have spoken, and I have listened. The perfume, the smudge, the passage, the glove, the letter, they all point to the truth." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Eleanor's hands trembled. Charles's face was flushed with anger. Grayson stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lady Marwood watched with icy calm, while Varnier leaned forward, his expression tense. The safe, Poirot continued, held documents that would have ruined 2 people, Charles and Eleanor Marwood. They conspired to defraud their fathers. Partners, including Dr. Varnier. When Sir Reginald discovered their scheme, he threatened to expose them, and so they acted. Eleanor let out a choked sob, but Charles shouted, "This is nonsense. You've got no evidence." "Evidence," Poirot said, his voice rising. "The glove, stained with your father's blood, found in the garden. The passage leading to your room, Charles. The perfume, Eleanor, that lingered in the study. And Grayson, your loyal accomplice, who left his mark on the window pane. You thought you could hide, but you cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." Charles lunged forward, his face contorted with rage, but Japp's constables were faster, restraining him. Eleanor collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Grayson remained silent, his head bowed. "The truth," Poirot said, "is that you, Charles, and you, Eleanor, planned the murder. Grayson helped you cover it, using the passage to enter the study unseen. The dagger was a misdirection, meant to implicate Dr. Varnier, but you made mistakes, and those mistakes have betrayed you." As the constables led Charles and Grayson away, Eleanor's sobs filled the room. Lady Marwood rose, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "how did you know?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The little grey cells, madame. They see what others do not." As the household dispersed, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The truth had been revealed, but not yet fully. The documents were still missing, and he suspected they were hidden somewhere in the manor. But for now, the killers had been unmasked, and justice was in motion. The next day, as Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave Marwood Manor, Hastings shook his head in amazement. "I don't know how you do it, Poirot. All those clues, all those lies, you saw through them all." Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes twinkling. "It is simple, mon ami. The truth, it is like a melody. Once you hear it, you cannot mistake it for anything else." And with that, they stepped into the waiting car, leaving Marwood Manor behind, its secrets laid bare. Chapter 9. A dangerous confrontation. The air in Marwood Manor hung heavy with suspicion, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of calculated chaos, had spent the past days weaving a delicate web of observation and deduction. His little grey cells buzzed with activity, piecing together the puzzle of Sir Reginald Marwood's murder. The crime scene, a locked study, an antique dagger, a missing safe's contents had yielded clues that pointed to a conspiracy within the household. Now, in the late afternoon of the investigation's fifth day, Poirot stood poised to shake the foundations of the suspect's carefully constructed facades. The drawing room, with its high ceilings and ornate chandeliers, was the stage for Poirot's next move. He had requested the presence of all the key players: Lady Marwood, elegant but strained; Charles, the ambitious son with a temper; Eleanor, the secretive daughter whose composure was fraying; Mr. Grayson, the butler whose stoic demeanour masked a deeper loyalty; and Dr. Varnier, the mysterious guest with a shadowed past. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood by Poirot's side, his notebook open, though his pen had long since stilled, captivated by the unfolding drama. Poirot adjusted his impeccable suit, his moustache twitching as he surveyed the room. "Miss Amos," he began, his voice soft yet commanding, "we are gathered here because the truth, she is like a shy creature. She hides, but with the right encouragement she will emerge." His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the faces. Before him, Lady Marwood sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Charles leaned against the fireplace, his jaw set, while Eleanor's gaze darted nervously to the window. Grayson stood near the door, his posture impeccable, but his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Dr. Varnier, seated in an armchair, crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. Hastings shifted beside Poirot, whispering, "What's your plan, old chap? You've got them all on edge." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Patience, mon ami. The plan, it is to unsettle, to provoke. The guilty, they cannot resist the pressure of their own conscience." He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. "The murder of Sir Reginald Marwood," he continued, "was no act of impulse. Nan, it was a carefully orchestrated affair, planned with precision and executed with audacity. But the murderer or murderers did not account for Hercule Poirot. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I have observed, I have hypothesized, I have eliminated the impossible. And now, Madame et Messieurs, I am close to the truth. A murmur rippled through the room. Charles snorted, crossing his arms. This is absurd, Poirot. You've been poking around for days, and what have you got? Nothing but theories. Poirot raised a finger, his eyes gleaming. Theories, Monsieur Charles, are the threads from which the tapestry of truth is woven. And one such thread has led me to a most curious discovery. He reached into his pocket and produced a small folded cloth, holding it up for all to see. It was the blood-stained glove Hastings had found in the garden, carefully preserved in a silk handkerchief. This glove, it was found near the rose bushes, not far from the study window. A careless oversight, none. Eleanor's face paled, her fingers tightening on the armrest of her chair. Lady Marwood gasped softly, her hand rising to her throat. Charles's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Grayson remained impassive, though his shoulders stiffened slightly. Dr. Varnier leaned forward, his brow furrowing. A glove, Lady Marwood said, her voice trembling. What does it mean, Monsieur Poirot? It means, Madame, that someone in this house was not as careful as they believed. Poirot's tone was measured, almost gentle, but his words carried a sting. The glove, it is stained with blood, sir. Reginald's blood, I presume. The laboratory will confirm this soon enough. But more intriguing is its size, its make. Is a glove for a small hand, perhaps a woman's, or a man with delicate fingers? Eleanor's breath hitched, and she quickly looked away, her hands now hidden in her lap. Charles stepped forward, his voice sharp. You're grasping at straws, Poirot. A glove could belong to anyone. A gardener, a maid, Nan Poirot interrupted, wagging his finger. The gardeners wear heavy work gloves, and the maids, they have no business near the rose bushes at night. This glove, it is fine, expensive. It belongs to someone in this room. The tension in the air thickened, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Hastings glanced at Poirot, his eyes wide with anticipation. He knew his friend was playing a dangerous game, planting seeds of doubt to provoke a reaction. But Poirot's calm demeanour gave no hint of the gamble he was taking. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us consider another clue, he said, his voice almost conversational. The smudge on the window pane of the study. It was not dirt, as one might assume, but a trace of shoe polish black, of the finest quality. The kind used by a meticulous man, perhaps a butler, who prides himself on his appearance. His gaze settled briefly on Grayson, who met it with a steady stare but said nothing. And then Poirot continued, there is the matter of the perfume. A delicate scent, floral yet distinctive, lingering in the study. I have traced it to Mademoiselle Eleanor's dressing table. Curious, Nan, that such a scent should be found in a room where no one claims to have been. Eleanor's eyes flashed with panic, but she quickly composed herself, her voice cold. I often visited Father's study. My perfume could have lingered from earlier in the day. Perhaps, Poirot said, tilting his head. But the scent was fresh, mademoiselle, as if you were there the night of the murder. This is outrageous, Charles snapped, stepping toward Poirot. You're accusing my sister based on perfume. This is a witch hunt. Poirot raised a hand, his expression serene. Calm yourself, Monsieur Charles. I accuse no one yet. I merely present the facts, and the facts, they tell a story of a hidden passage, a missing safe's contents, and a conspiracy to silence Sir Reginald before he could expose a terrible secret. Dr. Varnier, who had been silent until now, stood abruptly. I've had enough of this charade, he said, his voice clipped. I have no part in this. I'm leaving. He moved toward the door, but Poirot's voice stopped him cold. Leaving, Doctor, before we discuss the letter found in Sir Reginald's desk. A letter that speaks of a scandal, a betrayal, and a man named Varnier who lost everything to Sir Reginald's ruthless ambition. Varnier froze, his hand on the doorknob. Slowly he turned, his face pale but defiant. That letter proves nothing. I had no reason to kill him. I came here to settle old debts, not to commit murder. Poirot nodded, as if considering this. Perhaps, Docteur, but the truth, it is not so easily dismissed. The letter suggests a motive, and your sudden desire to flee, it does not inspire confidence. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words pressing down on everyone. Hastings could feel the tension, like a taut wire ready to snap. He leaned toward Poirot, whispering, "You're pushing them hard, Poirot. What if they don't crack?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with mischief. "They will, mon ami. The guilty always do." As the evening progressed, Poirot suggested they retire to the dining room for tea, a seemingly innocent gesture that Hastings knew was anything but. The household complied, though the air was thick with unease. The long mahogany table was set with fine china, and a silver teapot gleamed under the chandelier's light. Poirot, ever the gracious guest, took his seat at the head of the table, his demeanour as polished as ever. "Tea. It is a most civilized ritual," Poirot remarked, lifting his cup. "It calms the nerves, Nan. And yet, in this house, even tea may hold surprises." Hastings frowned, catching the glint in Poirot's eye, before he could ask what his friend meant. Poirot raised system, set down his teacup with a deliberate clink, his movements precise. "You'll forgive me, madame," he said to Lady Marwood, "but I must examine this tea more closely." He lifted the cup to his nose, inhaling deeply, then set it down untouched. "A most unusual blend, Nan." Lady Marwood's eyes widened, her hand trembling slightly as she poured her own tea. "Is something wrong, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps nothing, madame, but one cannot be too careful in a house where murder has occurred." Hastings' heart skipped a beat. He knew Poirot's instincts were razor-sharp, and the mention of the tea sent a chill down his spine. Had someone tampered with it? The thought was chilling, but not surprising given the mounting evidence of deceit. He glanced around the table, noting the strained expressions of the others. Eleanor's cup remained untouched, her fingers fidgeting. With her napkin, Charles sipped his tea with forced nonchalance, while Grayson stood silently by the sideboard, his face a mask. Dr. Varnier's gaze was fixed on Poirot, his jaw tight. The conversation turned to mundane topics, the weather, the state of the Manor's gardens, but the undercurrent of tension was palpable. Poirot continued to steer the discussion, dropping subtle hints about the case. "The hidden passage, for example," he said casually, stirring his tea. "It is a remarkable feature of this house, Nan. A secret way to move unseen, to enter a locked room, perhaps." Charles choked on his tea, coughing violently. "You keep harping on that passage," he said, wiping his mouth. "It's been there for centuries. Doesn't mean anyone used it." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone light. "But it is curious." Is it not that the passage leads directly to your room, Monsieur Charles? Charles's face reddened, his fists clenching. You're trying to pin this on me, aren't you? I was in London that night. Poirot raised an eyebrow. The train ticket, it tells a different story. You returned earlier than you claimed. Nan Eleanor's cup clattered against its saucer, drawing all eyes to her. This is intolerable, she said, her voice shaking. You're twisting everything to make us look guilty. Poirot's expression softened, almost sympathetic. Mademoiselle, the truth does not bend to our wishes. It is like the mirror, it shows what is, not what we desire. The meal concluded, with strained politeness, and the group returned to the drawing-room. Poirot, however, lingered by the dining table, motioning for Hastings to join him. Once the others were out of earshot, he whispered that Tea Monomet was poisoned. Hastings gasped, his eyes wide. Poisoned? Are you certain? Poirot nodded gravely. A faint, bitter scent, almost imperceptible. I did not drink, but I suspect it was meant to silence me. Someone in this room is growing desperate. Good Lord, Hastings muttered, glancing toward the drawing-room. Who, that mon ami, is what we must discover. But the net is closing. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. The guilty one, they have made a fatal mistake. As they rejoined the others, Poirot's demeanor shifted back to its usual charm. But Hastings could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. The detective began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice taking on a theatrical quality. Let us review the facts, shall we? Sir Reginald, he was a man of secrets, a safe full of documents, now missing, a hidden passage, a blood-stained glove, a torn photograph, and now an attempt on the life of Hercule Poirot. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Lady Marwood's hand flew to her mouth. An attempt on your life, Monsieur Poirot. What are you saying? Poirot turned to her, his gaze piercing. I am saying, madame, that someone in this house fears what I know, and that fear, it drives them to desperate measures. Dr. Varnier stood again, his voice sharp. This is madness. I'm not staying here to be accused of poisoning tea. He stormed toward the door, but Poirot's voice cut through the air like a whip. Stop, doctor. Poirot's tone was commanding, and Varnier froze, his hand on the doorknob. You will not leave until I permit it. The police, they are on their way, and no one departs this manor until the truth is revealed. Varnier's shoulders slumped, and he returned to his seat, his face ashen. Hastings watched the exchange, his heart pounding. Poirot was turning up the heat, and the room felt like a pressure cooker ready to burst. Poirot resumed his pacing, his voice calm but relentless. Let us consider the photograph, torn and burned in the fireplace. It showed Sir Reginald with a woman, someone not his wife. A lover, perhaps, or a partner in some illicit venture. The truth, it lies in these details. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. Stop it, she cried, leaping to her feet. You're tormenting us. You have no proof, only insinuations. Poirot stopped, turning to face her. Proof, mademoiselle. It is coming. The glove, the perfume, the passage, the letter, they are pieces of the puzzle. And soon the final piece will fall into place. Charles slammed his fist on the table, rattling the teacups. Enough, you're bluffing, Poirot. You've got nothing but parlour tricks. Poirot's smile was cold. Parlour tricks, monsieur. Naine. Hercule Poirot does not bluff. I observe, I deduce, and I reveal. And the revelation, it is near. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words suffocating. Hastings could see the cracks forming Lena's trembling hands, Charles's clenched jaw, Grayson's subtle shift in posture, Vania's haunted expression. Even Lady Marwood seemed on the verge of collapse, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. As the evening wore on, Poirot suggested a break, allowing the suspects to retire to their rooms. But he pulled Hastings aside once more, his voice low. "We must act quickly, mon ami. The poison, it was a bold move. The guilty one knows I am close, and they will strike again if we do not." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. "What's the next step?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "We set a trap. Tomorrow I will announce that I have found the murder weapon with new evidence. The guilty one will panic, and in their panic they will betray themselves." Hastings swallowed hard. "And if they try to kill you again?" Poirot chuckled softly. "Then we shall be ready, mon ami. The little grey cells, they are never caught off guard." As they parted for the night, Hastings couldn't shake the feeling that the manor was a ticking time bomb. Poirot's plan was brilliant, but dangerous. The murderer was cornered, and a cornered animal was unpredictable. He glanced at Poirot, who was calmly adjusting his cufflinks, his face serene despite the danger. "Get some rest, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice soft. "Tomorrow we bring this case to its conclusion." Hastings nodded, but sleep seemed impossible. The shadows of Marwood Manor loomed large, and the truth was closer than ever, but at what cost? Chapter 10. The Hidden Truth. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of Marwood Manor, casting long golden streaks across the polished oak floors of the library where Hercule Poirot sat, his hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance. The room smelled faintly of old leather and wax polish, a scent that seemed to anchor the detective's thoughts as he pieced together the puzzle that had consumed him since his arrival. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, hovered near the fireplace, pretending to read a newspaper but casting frequent glances at Poirot, waiting for the inevitable moment when the detective's little grey cells would produce their next revelation. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of facts, each one a thread in the intricate tapestry of the murder of Sir Reginald Marwood. The locked study, the antique dagger, the missing contents of the hidden safe, the faint trace of perfume, the smudge on the windowpane, the torn photograph, the blood-stained Glovitch clue had been carefully catalogued, examined, and cross-referenced in his mental ledger. Now, in this quiet moment, the pieces were beginning to align, forming a picture that was as disturbing as it was clear. The truth, Poirot knew, was close at hand, but it required one final push to bring it fully into the light. "Mon ami," Poirot said suddenly, breaking the silence and causing Hastings to startle, the newspaper crinkling in his hands. "You have been patient, but I sense your curiosity. You wish to know what Poirot has discovered, none?" Hastings folded the newspaper and leaned forward, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Well, naturally, Poirot. You've been awfully quiet this morning, and after that business with the poisoned tea yesterday, I'm on edge. Have you worked it out? Do you know who killed Sir Reginald?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his moustache twitching slightly. "The truth, Hastings, is like a fine wine. It must be savoured slowly, allowed to breathe. But yes, I have made progress. The contents of the safe, which have so eluded us, are the key, and I believe I know where they are hidden." Hastings's eyebrows shot up. "The safe's contents? You mean the documents everyone's been whispering about? But we searched everywhere behind the painting, in the study, even in the hidden passage," precisement, Poirot said, raising a finger. And that is why we must look where no one else has thought to look. The mind of the criminal, Hastings, is both clever and predictable. They hide what they fear will betray them, but they cannot resist keeping it close. Hastings frowned, clearly struggling to follow. Close, you mean in the manner? Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming, in the very heart of it. Come, we shall pay a visit to Mademoiselle Eleanor's room. I have a suspicion that her secrets are not as well hidden as she believes. The two men rose, Poirot leading the way. With his characteristic measured gait, his cane tapping lightly on the floor, the manor was quiet, the household still reeling from the events of the previous evening when Poirot had narrowly escaped a second murder attempt. The poisoned tea had been a bold move, one that confirmed to Poirot that the killer or killers were growing desperate. It was a sign that his probing was hitting its mark. Eleanor Marwood's room was on the second floor, a spacious chamber, decorated with delicate floral wallpaper and heavy velvet drapes. When Poirot and Hastings arrived, they found the door slightly ajar. A faint draught carrying the now familiar scent of Eleanor's perfume jasmine with a hint of sandalwood. Poirot paused at the threshold, his sharp eyes scanning the room before stepping inside. Observe, Hastings, he said softly, gesturing to the neatly made bed, the polished dressing table, the wardrobe filled with elegant gowns. Everything is in its place, none too perfect, perhaps. The room of a woman who wishes to appear innocent. Hastings, ever practical, began poking around, lifting cushions and peering under the bed. What are we looking for, exactly? Papers, letters. Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved to the dressing table, his fingers brushing lightly over the surface. Pausing at a small, ornate jewelry box, he opened it, revealing an assortment of necklaces and earrings, but his attention was drawn to the false bottom. Barely perceptible unless one knew to look for it. With a deft movement, he pressed a hidden catch, and the base of the box sprang open, revealing a slim, leather-bound notebook. Voila, Poirot said, lifting the notebook with a triumphant gleam in his eye. The diary of Mademoiselle Eleanor. Hastings hurried over, peering at the small book in Poirot's hands. A diary. Good heavens, Poirot, do you think she wrote about the murder? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not the murder itself, perhaps, but the motives that led to it. Let us see what secrets she has confided to these pages. He opened the diary, its pages filled with Eleanor's precise, elegant handwriting. The entries were dated, spanning several months, and as Poirot skimmed them, his expression grew increasingly grave. The diary was written in a curious shorthand, a mix of abbreviations and symbols that suggested a code. But Poirot, with his keen intellect, began to decipher it almost immediately. Listen, Hastings, he said, reading aloud a passage from a month earlier. C. insists we act soon. Father suspects. The papers are safe, but D.V. grows restless. Must protect the plan at all costs. Hastings's eyes widened. C. That must be Charles. And D.V. Dr. Varnier, surely. But what plan? And what papers? Poirot continued reading, flipping through the pages. Another entry caught his eye. Father found the ledger. Threatened to go to the authorities. C says we have no choice. The passage is ready. The passage? Hastings exclaimed. The hidden passage behind the study. So they used it to get to Sir Reginald. Poirot nodded, his expression sombre. It appears so. This diary confirms what I have suspected. Charles and Eleanor were involved in a scheme to defraud their father's business partners, including Dr. Varnier. The contents of the safe likely financial records or contracts would have exposed their deceit. Sir Reginald, upon discovering their treachery, became a threat they could not ignore. Hastings sank into a chair, his face pale. So they killed him, their own father. That's monstrous, Poirot. Monstrous, yes, Poirot agreed, but not uncommon. Greed and fear are powerful motives, Hastings. They drive even the closest of kin to betrayal. Poirot slipped the diary into his pocket and continued his search of the room, his movements methodical. He examined the wardrobe, the bookshelves, the writing desk, but found nothing else of immediate interest. Yet the diary was enough a damning piece of evidence that confirmed the conspiracy at the heart of the murder. "We must be cautious, Hastings," Poirot said as they left Eleanor's room. "The discovery of this diary will make our adversaries desperate. They may act rashly, and we must be prepared." The rest of the day passed in a tense blur. Poirot, ever the strategist, began laying the groundwork for his final move. He requested a meeting with Inspector Japp, who had arrived at the manor to oversee the investigation, and shared his findings in confidence. Japp, though initially skeptical of Poirot's methods, agreed to station constables discreetly around the manor in case of further trouble. Meanwhile, Poirot continued to observe the suspects, noting their behavior with a keen eye. Eleanor, usually composed, seemed distracted, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea in the drawing-room. Charles, on the other hand, was belligerent, snapping at the servants and avoiding Poirot's gaze. Dr. Varnier, still shaken from the suspicion cast upon him, kept to himself, while Lady Marwood drifted through the manor like a ghost, her grief tempered by an air of resignation. Only Mr. Grayson, the butler, maintained his stoic demeanour, though Poirot detected a flicker of unease in his eyes whenever the hidden passage was mentioned. That evening, Poirot gathered the household in the dining room under the pretence of discussing the investigation's progress. The long mahogany table was set with crystal and silver, but the atmosphere was far from festive. The suspects sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting to Poirot as he stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back. "Madame et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "the murder of Sir Reginald Marwood has puzzled us all, but I am pleased to say that the truth is no longer hidden. The clues have spoken, and they point to a conspiracy born of greed and betrayal." A murmur rippled through the room. Eleanor's teacup clattered against its saucer, and Charles's jaw tightened. Dr. Varnier leaned forward, his expression a mix of curiosity and dread, while Lady Marwood stared blankly at the table. Grayson stood by the door, his face impassive but his hands clasped tightly. Poirot continued, pacing slowly. The locked study was a clever misdirection, designed to suggest an impossible crime. But the hidden passage, known to certain members of this household, provided the means. The antique dagger, wiped clean of fingerprints, was chosen to implicate an outsider, perhaps Dr. Varnier, whose past with Sir Reginald made him a convenient scapegoat. Dr. Varnier's face reddened. "I had nothing to do with it, Poirot. You know that." "Indeed," Monsieur Poirot said, raising a hand. "You are innocent, though you were meant to take the blame. The true culprits are those who stood to lose the most if Sir Reginald exposed their schemed to defraud his business partners and secure his fortune for themselves." Charles slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. You have no proof, Poirot. You're spinning tales to trap us." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No proof, Monsieur Charles. Then perhaps you can explain the contents of your sister's diary, which details your plan to silence your father before he could reveal your fraud." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "My diary, how did you?" Poirot produced the leather-bound notebook from his pocket, holding it up for all to see. "This, mademoiselle, is the key to the truth. It speaks of your agreement with your brother, your knowledge of the hidden passage, and your fear that your father had discovered the incriminating documents in the safe." The room erupted into chaos. Charles leaped to his feet, shouting denials, while Eleanor buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Lady Marwood stared at her children in horror, and Dr. Varnier's expression shifted from shock to grim satisfaction. Grayson, ever the loyal butler, took a step forward as if to intervene. But Poirot's sharp glance stopped him in his tracks. "Enough." Poirot's voice cut through the din, restoring order. "The documents from the safe, which you believed were destroyed, have been recovered. They prove that you, Charles, and you, Eleanor, conspired to defraud Sir Reginald's partners, including Dr. Varnier. When your father discovered the ledger, you knew he would go to the authorities, and so you acted. The hidden passage allowed you to enter the study undetected, and the dagger stolen from the Manners collection was a deliberate choice to cast suspicion elsewhere." Charles's face was ashen, but he tried to muster defiance. "You can't prove we used the passage and the dagger. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot's smile was cold. "The smudge on the window pane, Messieurs, matches the polish used by Mr. Grayson, who assisted in covering your tracks. And the blood-stained glove, found by Captain Hastings, bears traces of the same perfume worn by Mademoiselle Eleanor. The evidence is overwhelming." Eleanor's sobs grew louder, and she shook her head. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Charles said. "It would be quick, that no one would suspect us." "Eleanor, be quiet." Charles hissed, but it was too late. The confession hung in the air, a final nail in the coffin of their deception. Poirot turned to Inspector Japp, who had been waiting in the wings. "Inspector, I believe you have what you need to proceed." Japp nodded, signalling to the constables, who entered the room. "Charles Marwood, Eleanor Marwood, you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Marwood. Mr. Grayson, you'll be coming with us as well for questioning." As the constables led the trio away, the dining room fell silent. Lady Marwood, her face a mask of grief, rose and left without a word. Dr. Varnier, cleared of suspicion, offered Poirot a nod of gratitude before retreating to his room. Hastings, still processing the revelation, turned to Poirot with a look of awe. "Good Lord, Poirot," he said, "you had it all worked out, didn't you? The diary, the passage, the glovet, all came together like clockwork." Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his expression serene. "The method, Hastings, is everything. Observation, hypothesis, elimination, deduction, and now revelation. The truth cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." The manner seemed to exhale as the truth was laid bare, its secrets no longer a burden. Poirot and Hastings lingered in the dining room, the weight of the case settling around them. The detective's mind was already turning to the next challenge. But for now, the mystery of Marwood Manor was solved. The following morning, as they prepared to leave, Hastings couldn't resist one final question. "Poirot, how did you know to look in Eleanor's jewellery box? It was such an unlikely place." Poirot chuckled softly. "The mind of a woman, Hastings, is a treasure chest of secrets, and where better to hide a treasure than among her jewels?" With that, they stepped out into the crisp morning air the manor fading into the distance behind them. The case was closed, but Poirot's legend, as always, grew stronger. The days that followed were a blur of formalities. Inspector Japp oversaw the arrests and the evidence Selenor's diary, the recovered documents. The blood-stained glove was meticulously catalogued. The newspapers, ever hungry for scandal, splashed the story across their front pages. Marwood heirs arrested in shocking murder plot. Poirot, true to form, avoided the limelight, leaving Japp to handle the reporters while he and Hastings returned to London. In the quiet of his apartment, Poirot reflected on the case, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The five-step method had once again proven its worth, but it was the human element, the greed, the betrayal, the desperation that fascinated him most. Crime, Hastings, he said one evening over a glass of tisane, is a window into the soul. And the soul, it is never simple. Hastings nodded, though he suspected he would never fully grasp the intricacies of Poirot's mind. For now, he was content to bask in the glow of another triumph, another mystery unravelled by the inimitable Hercule Poirot, and so, the case of Marwood Manor drew to a close, its secrets laid bare, its justice served. But for Poirot, the world was full of puzzles waiting to be solved, and his little grey cells were never at rest.